I am here to tell everyone that things change. Things do change. Sometimes it doesn't seem that way, but things do change. And while right now the Heisman Trophy has been and will be, and probably will continue to be, as long as we are on this planet and people are playing college football in the United States, a big deal. And we've got the Nagurski, and we've got the Budkiss, and the Thorpe, and the Doak Walker, and the Davey O'Brien, all these awards across the board in college football. We are introducing to many of you something that's been around for a little while that you may not be aware of. And we could very well be here 100 years from now. I probably won't make it quite that far. It might just be past my existence here 100 years from now. But it most notably won't be my son sitting here. He's got far better things to do than mess around with college football, that's for sure. But maybe my grandson will be handing out the Voice of College Football awards, and people will be scratching their heads and thinking, yeah, I've read about this thing called the Heisman. Yeah, the Nagurski. That's kind of a strange name. Where'd that guy come from? What is that all about? But now we've got the Voice of College Football awards, and that's where it's all at. All right, welcome into the Voice of College Football, everyone. That's the best I could do for an open tonight off the top of my head. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes you nail it, sometimes you don't. And so for some of you out there, you're thinking, Mark, when do you ever nail it for an open? All right. But again, the best I could do on short notice. Boom. Where do we open? Oh, we go with a hyperbole and the College Football Playoff Awards right here at the Voice of College Football. These have been handed out on social media, on Twitter in the past. And I have been rather amused and also surprised at times by the player reaction and their gratefulness and gratitude in receiving a Voice of College Football award. So also, let's understand that I am not the most creative person in the world, if you haven't noticed. We are meat and potatoes college football analysis here. I would love to entertain, and probably should have asked many of you over the course of the last couple of weeks, hey, come up with some slick, creative, funny, sarcastic. Oh, I love sarcasm. Love sarcasm. But my sarcasm is typically like in the moment. You know, to sit here and think about, okay, what would be a good sarcastic college football award? Maybe, oh, this is an easy one. This is just a slam dunk or a layup, I guess it would be. Big Ten Offensive Coordinator of the Year or National Offensive Coordinator of the Year would, of course, go to fill in the blank. You know, we could go that route, but we don't want to be demeaning, do we? So we are going flat out with what we've done in the past. And again, I've done very little here on the YouTube channel in regards to publicizing our Voice of College Football Conference Players of the Year awards, both on the offensive and the defensive side. So we've got 20 awards to hand out. And we will be contacting the players in question that receive the awards. We will be reaching out to them on social media and letting them know that they have received the prestigious Voice of College Football Conference Player of the Year awards. So certainly leave your feedback, your comments, your questions, and of course you will provide me with either your approval or your disapproval. Mark, what are you talking about? They shouldn't have won. So we will be inviting your comments. And of course, call the show. We've left the link in the chat. However, I'm going to go through my Conference Player of the Years. We are also going to be running through the bowl games that get started on Saturday. Woo! We got bowl games on Saturday, folks. Did I wake everyone up? 7 bowl games. Now, if you took these bowl game names out to your most recent block party, Christmas party at work, and asked them about the Camellia Bowl or the Guaranteed Rate Bowl, they would have no idea what you're talking about. It's not exactly Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl, Cotton Bowl, Orange Bowl that we're talking about coming up on Saturday, but we, Voice of College Football Nation, we are hardcore. So we are locked in starting at 11 a.m. Eastern time on Saturday. So be right here. We will be here throughout the day to talk college football with you. And even though there are going to be 7 games going on, I am going to guarantee that nobody's going to call me about any of these 7 games that are going on. You're all going to call me about the transfer portal and about the college football playoff. And that's fine. That's great. But I am going to be watching college football from 11 a.m. I believe 11 a.m. And I apologize that I no longer have my mic crane to move with me, but we will get it back at some point. It's right over there. But we've got 11 a.m. the Myrtle Beach Bowl with Georgia Southern taking on the Bobcats of Ohio. And then I'm going to be locked in throughout the day, and especially at the end, Cal, Texas Tech. I can relate to those games a little bit better, follow those teams throughout the year, UCLA and Boise State. Looking forward to Bowl Mania starting, which, by the way, also leads me to this. We have a Bowl Mania challenge here at the Voice of College Football. Ding! That just popped into my head when I said Bowl Mania. Forgot about this. Joey Foster, thank you so much for setting this up. So if you go to the community page, and at some point in the show, I will grab the link and put it in the live chat because we want to keep you all right here. I will drop the link in the chat, and if you believe that you can be the best at delivering your confidence picks, we're going with the confidence pick route on the, what is it? It's been 41 bowl games. I don't know what the number is this year, around 40 bowl games. Then we will, of course, be honoring all of you that are the best in selecting college football bowl games, confidence picks, right here at the Voice of College Football. So join our bowl challenge. And again, the link's on the community page. The most recent, I believe, maybe the second to last post on the community page. We're going to go through the bowl games. 7 on Saturday, 1 Monday, 1 Tuesday, but at least the ones on Saturday. We got Steve Helwick from SB Nation stopping by. We've got our Conference Player of the Year awards, which I know now that I've announced that, all of you are like, Mark, shut up and get to those Conference Player of the Year awards. Get to them now. And then, of course, we got to check out the transfer portal. Got to do that as well. All right. I do apologize for just posting this link. I just set this live stream up, even though it was scheduled. It's been scheduled all week, but I do apologize because I just set it up like 30 minutes ago. So that usually leads me to anticipate a small crowd, small gathering when we have just a late posted link. So get on the phone. Get your family in here. Get your friends. We are going to the Voice of College Football Conference Player of the Year awards starting right now. But I got to check out the chat first. Yes, never mind me. Games on this weekend. 7 on Saturday. Mike Ford, I don't have a problem with Parker winning the Broyles, to be honest. Nor should you, of course. Sharon Moore was up for the Broyles Award. Somebody explain that to me. I'm not saying he's not a fine coach, but best offensive coordinator in college football this year? Where did that come from? Based on what? Based on what? Clint is letting us know here, and this was actually suggested by somebody else this week. So I've got nothing to do with FCS football. Not that I don't respect it. Not that I wouldn't enjoy it if there were no other options, but I know nothing about what's going on in the FCS. I guarantee just about everybody watching right now knows more about FCS football than I do. However, I do know that many of you step up. You step up to the plate, meaning we could host an FCS post game or a pre game or an in game, and you guys would show up and you guys would school me. You guys would educate me on the FCS, and we would watch the games together, and that would be a whole lot of fun. So, Clint, that's a great suggestion. I guess I got to go to a TV guide, go online, figure out when the FCS games are. I think they've already been played, correct? We've already started. Okay. All right. Okay. Moose, we love you. Hope you know, Moose, every time I pick on one of your statements, you know that I am indebted to you for being here faithfully at the Voice of College Football. But okay, to really believe that Sharon Moore was the person most responsible for defeating those two top 10 teams, more so than the Michigan defense. All right. So again, appreciate you all being here at the Voice of College Football. And I see that Erica's joined the chat. She will be waiting with bated breath to see whether an Iowa player has been named Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year. It was a close call, I will tell you that. I stewed long and hard for probably about 11 seconds on that decision. But Clint, that is a good idea. Doug, you might be referring to our bowl challenge. Again, you can join it right here at the Voice of College Football on the community page. Erica likes my enthusiasm. Yeah, I don't know what got into me. Long, hard work day for Erica and many of you because it's a Thursday and it's right around, 6 p.m. Eastern time. So yeah, for many of you, just the end of the workday. For me, the workday is what the workday is. I was talking to Corey Brad about that the other day. He's like, man, if I would have to go back to a regular job and lose all this freedom, there's give and take. What can I say? Yes. I certainly wasn't working at like 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning and then all over the place 3 o'clock in the morning before. But yeah, you have your give and take. But long, hard work day for many of you. And again, this Sharon Moore, again, this is old news. I shouldn't even go there. But Sharon Moore being up for the brawl. I was just shocked when I saw that. When I saw the candidates and I saw that Phil Barker won, and he was the only defensive coach that was nominated, or a finalist, I should say. And then there were 3 offensive coordinators, and it was Sharon Moore of Michigan. And I can't even remember who else, but I do remember they were offensive coordinators. And I thought, who doesn't belong in this finalist round? What the heck different was about Michigan's offensive performance this year than it was last year, except it was worse. How do you get nominated for a national award, a highly acclaimed award, for doing a worse job than what you did last year? I don't get it. But there you go. All right, let's get to it. All right, let's start. Let's start with a MAC here. Mid-American Conference, folks. Our Voice of College Football Mid-American Conference Offensive Player of the Year is Penny Boone of Toledo. Ran for 1,400 yards. That was the number 1 figure in the MAC. 6th best rushing total in the nation, 7.2 yards per carry. He led the MAC in yards per carry. He led the MAC in touchdowns with 15. His team went 11-2, and they marched on to the MAC championship game. They lost to Miami there, but they were 11-1 before that. Only a last play of the game field goal against Illinois kept Toledo from being undefeated during the regular season. So our MAC Offensive Player of the Year is running back Penny Boone of Toledo. Defense for the MAC. Ty Wise, Miami of Ohio. Exceptional defense with the Red Hawks. They won the MAC championship game over Toledo, held the Rockets to just, I believe, 14 points in that game. Ty Wise racked up 110 tackles. He was sixth in the nation with 7 sacks. Exceptional season. Number 5 in the nation with 110 tackles. Ty Wise of Miami of Ohio is our MAC Defensive Player of the Year. And again, he will be notified, not by mail, by Twitter. And I'm sure he will be overjoyed. And there will be cause for celebration at the Wise household. Moving on to the Sun Belt, we've got our Sun Belt Offensive Player of the Year in Jordan McLeod of James Madison, who has, and this is going to be the unfortunate thing, there's going to be a day and time in the future that many of us will be talking about. Yes, the Voice of College Football Awards. Remember when those guys were not opt-outs or those guys didn't transfer? But here we've got one. Jordan McLeod in the transfer portal from James Madison, 69% passer for James Madison, 11-1, 3,400 yards. Of course, they're moving on to a bowl game. They fought the bowl system. Were not eligible technically because of their newfound status in the FBS, only their second season, but they won the waiver that was waived. And there you see he had a total of 41 touchdowns. So Jordan McLeod, James Madison, Sun Belt Offensive Player of the Year right here at the Voice of College Football. Our VOCFB, I've never said it like that before, VOCFB, Sun Belt Defensive Player of the Year, defensive lineman Jalen Green. James Madison sweeps in the Sun Belt. So I'm sure there is going to be a litany of backlash from college football fans across the nation at me. I think the backlash is probably going to be overwhelming, that it was a clean sweep, and I clearly am biased towards James Madison. 50 tackles, 21 tackles for loss, 15.5 sacks. Those statistics ranked highly nationally. So Jalen Green was second in the nation in sacks. He had a pick 6, which proved decisive against South Alabama, winning 31-23, 2 forced fumbles, and again, a pick 6 in an 8-point game. Jalen Green, defensive lineman out of James Madison, the Sun Belt Defensive Player of the Year, according to the Voice of College Football. Maybe at a future time, we will have a vote on these. We will have a national vote among the college football community here at the Voice of College Football, and we will do it that way. We will see. Caden Salter of Liberty has led his team to an undefeated season and a Fiesta Bowl appearance against Oregon, and he is the Conference USA Offensive Player of the Year. 61% passer, 31 touchdowns, 5 picks, ran for over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns. So he accounted for 43 touchdowns. Caden Salter, one of the best, and Liberty, of course, had that remarkable 13-0 season. And it is Caden Salter, Liberty quarterback, Offensive Player of the Year, Voice of College Football. On the defensive side, in CUSA, Tyrese Knight of UTEP, 140 tackles. Good golly. That is number 1 in Conference USA. That is the 3rd best total in all of college football. 15.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, 6 passes defensed out of Tyrese Knight. And UTEP with a fine season, and Tyrese Knight was a big reason why. On to the Mountain West. Your Voice of College Football Offensive Player of the Year, Ashton Jeanty. Have you ever watched him run? He's been one of the best backs in college football for the last 2 or 3 seasons. 6.2 yards per carry, 39 catches out of the backfield, totaled over 1,800 yards, 19 total touchdowns for Ashton Jeanty. Let's see, he was second in the nation in total yards, number 5 in total touchdowns, leading rusher in the Mountain West Conference, 12th in the nation. And consider that situation at Boise State. They were 5-5. Head coach Andy Avalos fired. And then they move on to the Mountain West Championship from there. They win 4 consecutive games. Great job by Boise State, led by Ashton Genty. Their quarterback, Boise State, Taylon Green, has transferred to Arkansas, by the way. Staying in the Mountain West, we go to Colorado State, and Voice of College Football Defensive Player of the Year in the Mountain West, Mohamed Kamara, 56 tackles, 17 tackles for loss. That's a monster figure, 13 sacks. That, too, ranks in the top 5 in college football. Mohamed Kamara, your Defensive Player of the Year in the Mountain West. On to the American Conference. Let's go to the offensive side of the ball. And Preston Stone, he did not play for an SMU team that won the conference championship game against Texas San Antonio. But before that, 28 touchdowns, 6 picks, 4 rushing touchdowns, hit on 60% of his passes, had the 14th best passer rating in the country, most yards in the American, 21st in the country in passing yards, number 2 in touchdowns in the American, number 11 in the country, and again, led his team to a conference championship. Should have been in the New Year's Six. I will fight any Liberty fan on that point. On to the American Defensive Player of the Year, edge rusher Trey Moore. He's in the transfer portal. Looking at Texas and other schools, 17.5 tackles for loss, 14.5 sacks. Led the conference in sacks, number 3 in the nation in sacks. Offensive Player of the Year, let's go to the Power 5 in the ACC, Jordan Travis, Florida State. Forget all the numbers. I guess the College Football Playoff Selection Committee has let us know that Jordan Travis is the most important player in college football, period. He should have won like the MVP because Florida State was apparently a college football playoff team with him, but not without him. 20 touchdowns, 2 picks, 27 total touchdowns, didn't play the final 3 games roughly. And unfortunately, his season is over with the knee injury and his team out of the playoffs. On the defensive side in the ACC, we've got Peyton Wilson of NC State. Peyton Wilson took home a ton of hardware this offseason, and this just adds to it. And this is going to be at the top of the trophy case, and I'm sure that he is going to cherish this for decades to come. 138 total tackles, 17.5 tackles for loss for one Peyton Wilson. 3 picks as a linebacker with the pick 6 included. Now let's go to the Pac-12. Tough call to make here in the Pac-12. Again, I basically had sweat, even blood dripping down my brow as I waged this one back and forth in my mind between Michael Penix, Bo Nix. Penix wins. They won the championship. He played better in the 2 games that decided the championship. So Michael Penix, despite 9 interceptions and some pedestrian games in the midseason, showed up when he needed to. And still, he led the nation in passing yards. So maybe we including me, maybe have over publicized, talked a little too much, made a little bit too much out of his midseason slump. He did lose his weapons during that time, but led the nation in passing yardage, number 3 in passing touchdowns, number 3 in passer rating, threw for 302 and 319 yards in those 2 critical games against Oregon. Michael Penix is the final, when they write the history books, they write the final ledger of Pac-12 history. When the final book is sealed, the final chapter, and we thumb to it, we're going to see in that final paragraph that Michael Penix won the final Voice of College Football Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Year award. On the defensive side, it goes to Laiatu Latu. You got to watch this guy play. My goodness, he's a wrecking crew. He wrecked USC season, had some key stops in that game. 21 and a half tackles for loss for an excellent UCLA defense. 13 sacks. And for Latu, he led the Pac-12 in sacks, number 4 in the nation, 2 forced fumbles, and again, 21 and a half tackles for loss, and he's getting double teamed all the time. Tremendous player. Latu, UCLA. All right, moving on to the Big 12. We go to offense and Oklahoma State's Ollie Gordon. Ollie Gordon, to start this season, in the first 3 games of the year, only ran the ball 19 times, 6 carries per game. And look at what he did. He led the nation in rushing. Caught 37 passes out of the backfield. Had 21 total touchdowns. That's the number 1 figure in college football. Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, Ollie Gordon of Oklahoma State. On the defensive side, the Cowboys, the Pokes, sweep. Nicholas Martin, 133 tackles, 16 tackles for loss, and 6 sacks in leading that Oklahoma State defense, which wasn't necessarily a stellar unit. So it's a good thing he was there, to the Big 12 championship game, and a great turnaround from a horrendous start to the season. Nicholas Martin, our Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year. You may have heard of this guy, possibly. If not, I will let you know about him. I will probably bring him to the forefront of college football on this very night with 63 people watching. Jaden Daniels, 72% passer, 3,800 yards. That was number 3 in all of college football, 40 touchdowns. That tied Bo Nix for the best mark in all the land. Look at those rushing numbers. 8.4 yards per carry. That includes sacks. Jaden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner. I do agree. I believe it's a close call, but I do agree this was not a close call. Jaden Daniels, the number 1 player on the offensive side of the ball in the SEC. Your Defensive Player of the Year, according to the Voice of College Football, Mississippi State linebacker Nathaniel Watson. 137 tackles, 13 tackles for loss, and 10 sacks. Rarely find me a player, not just this year, go back year after year after year after year, who racks up that many tackles. Okay? Usually when you're racking up that many tackles, you are playing on your side of the line of scrimmage. You are not attacking the line of scrimmage and creating that many disruptive plays. 13 tackles for loss, 10 sacks, and 137 tackles. That's crazy. And his teammate was number 2 in the SEC in tackles. So he probably had a few stolen from him. Your SEC Defensive Player of the Year, according to the Voice of College Football, Nathaniel Watson, Mississippi State. All right, we have 1 conference left. Let me go through my notes to figure out what conference is that. Oh, it would be the Big 10. All right. If you are joining us for the first time here at the Voice of College Football, or you haven't noticed, we do cover the Big 10 from time to time here. So please join us for those shows, segments. We do pay some attention to the Big 10. Here is your Big 10 Offensive Player of the Year. He is Marvin Harrison of Ohio State. Need I defend this selection? 67 catches, 1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns in a Ohio State passing attack that was functional, good, not great, not prolific, not what it was. And he certainly was the go-to guy, and that was needed against some better teams like Penn State, like Maryland, and had a big day against Michigan with over 100 yards as well. Marvin Harrison is the Voice of College Football Big 10 Offensive Player of the Year. And finally, on the defensive side, now this was probably, other than deciding between Bo Nix and Michael Penix, and there were a few other choices that required some some research. Your Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year is cornerback Mike Sanderstill of Michigan. 5 picks, 2 touchdowns, 6 passes defensed. Got to watch the guy play. He and Will Johnson, I believe we are going to see, and maybe somebody can debate me on this. Please leave your comments there in the chat or give me a call. So many people on Twitter, and I just let them know, call me. I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, I heard you. I see the written statement. Call me and we'll talk about it. We'll debate it. Never do. Never do. That I will faint. You will hear my head hit the floor the first time anybody that makes some derogatory and usually insulting, derogatory, fine, insulting comment on Twitter actually follows through and calls me when I say, you know what? Call me. We'll talk about it. Mike Sanders still the best defensive player in the Big Ten. But again, this was close. This was a close call for me. All right, let's get to the phone lines. Appreciate you all being here. I will be checking out the comments and questions. Please consider contributing here at the Voice of College Football. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. They are the best ways to do that. All right. One of my very favorites, of course. Here he is, David Greenshield. What's going on tonight?
Yes. To the man that gives college football its voice, the great Mark Rogers. Hi, and how are you, sir?
I am doing well, David. More importantly, how are you?
I'm hanging in there. I'm still recovering, but I'm hanging in there, Mark. By the way, I wanted to ask, and I have not. Maybe I've asked you this before, but with all your years in college football, do you still vote for the Heisman, or you do not vote for the Heisman anymore?
I have never voted for the Heisman.
Really?
Now, I probably shouldn't have shunned this opportunity. I did have the opportunity this year to vote for the Butkus, the Nagurski, all those awards, but I just let it pass me by because I would have taken it not too seriously, but seriously. And therefore I could have put out a viable selection for all those candidates without looking into it, but I just didn't choose to.
Now,
But not the
you
Heisman.
this year. Okay. So I just heard your comment about Daniels. You don't have a problem with Daniels getting it. You think it was a close call, though.
Yes.
A close call between him and Penix, would you say, Mark? Or Nix?
Nix had a better season. Penix won those games that counted. It's supposed to go to the best player without team consideration. Now, if you want to write your own definition in there and then go with that, then I would have really thought about going another direction. But I was a Daniels 1, Bo 2, Penix 3. And I'm going to get slammed for that immediately because people are going to be, well, that doesn't make sense. You just voted Penix the offensive player of the year in the Pac-12. But those, to me, are different selections.
Now, do you think that Nix wins it if he beats Washington?
Not based on the vote that we saw. That certainly would have tightened it considerably, I would think. It was not close. And he was third.
Right. And you know what I think hurt Penix was that portion of football, that run of games, Mark, where his stats really trailed off for, what was it, like 3 or 4 games there?
Yeah, he had a pedestrian. And and if you heard my rundown when I got to Penix, I backed off on this language to a certain extent because for him, it was very pedestrian what he did there for 4 or 5 games, but he still led the nation in total yardage. So in passing yardage. So that's kind of tough to do, having pedestrian games week after week.
Yeah, the numbers fell back, but they fell back from being so astronomically good but the other thing too that he has in his corner, he came up big in the 2 biggest games of their season. So, I mean, that's obviously a really good argument for him. I would say this. Um, but I want to get to Marvin Harrison too here, Mark. But I will make the comment about Jaden Daniels just real quick, him winning. I think it says something, and you know what? Obviously, a 3-loss team just shows how good of a season he had and how much he had to carry what was a bad LSU defense. I was surprised about how bad they were on defense, by the way, that he had to carry them so much.
You would think it would be impossible for LSU to be that bad on defense. You
Yeah.
just think through recruiting and having a functional defensive coordinator that it would be impossible. But I know that our guy Matt Moscona that we have on here from ESPN Baton Rouge, he told us very early in the season before that was obvious. It might have been
Yeah.
before the season. He said these LSU defensive backs are like they should not be here. They should not be. They're that mediocre.
Right. Right. Remember, that was a program that set the standard for defensive back, with the run of guys they were putting in the NFL for that period of time, too,
Really?
Mark.
You're a Buckeye fan saying that.
Well, yeah, I would say that. I would say we were close. I would say through 2019, that was a stronger comparison. Now, I think Ohio State's secondary this year is very good. And I would still say Ohio State probably had one of the top 3 or 4 secondaries in the country this year. Because Burke was really good. Hancock was really good. And I would say that if they still had a healthy Lathan Ransom. If they had still had a healthy Lathan Ransom to go with Styles, I would put their secondary probably top 3 or 4.
But
You
you're
think
right.
that's
It has been disappointing 2020, 21, 22 for 3 consecutive
yeah,
years. The secondary that they put out there was just marginal.
right. Well, they had that run through 19. That 19 secondary was really good with Okuda, Wade, Arnett, and then Jordan Fuller, I thought was a really solid safety. And and that's when they had that run of like Ward, Lattimore, Conley, all those guys.
Oh,
And then it tailed off for a few years, and that's what cost them last year. I'd have given anything to have this secondary last year, because that's what really cost them last year defensively was the secondary. I did want to get to Marvin Harrison, Mark. I found out something interesting today on our good buddy Tony Gerdeman's podcast, by the way. I'm going to get to that in a second. And I'm going to say this, and people are going to be a little surprised. Did he deservedly win it this year, or could you have made a case for Neighbors from LSU should have gotten the Biletnikoff?
well, statistically, he should not have won the Biletnikoff. Did not have the best stats. If you're just a purely stats guy, who had the best stats? It was close. There were a lot of guys that had 80 some catches, 11 or
Right.
1,200 yards, 12 or 15 touchdowns. I believe Neighbors led the nation with 15 touchdowns, and Harrison had one less. So that's not enough for me to be just, okay, cross that off. I think there should be more meaningful analysis, but you can look at it this way. Neighbors had to share targets with Brian Thomas more so than Harrison did, but at the same time, then you can also make the play for Harrison having more responsibility in the offense than those guys did.
You think somebody out there looked at Jaden Daniels throwing you the ball, Kyle McCord throwing you the ball, Mark, or do you think that was weighed, baked into the cake there, or weighed into the equation?
But how many times did Kyle McCord actually throw the ball when Jaden Daniels tucked it and ran?
No, what I'm saying is that
Oh, I
you know
know
where
what
I'm
you're
going
saying.
with what I'm
He's
saying
better.
here, right? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Obviously,
Could there have been a couple of those voters who were giving now I'm not talking about a serious sympathy vote, but who were leaning in his direction because of what happened last year? He should have won the Biletnikoff Award last year.
that's right. That was going to be my next thing. Was this a makeup for
Yes.
them giving it to Hyatt last year, as
Yes.
juxtaposed to getting it over Marvin? Now, you defended that vote last year, Mark. You
I
defended
did not
Hyatt.
defend the vote.
Okay. Well, you
No.
would.
No, no,
Okay,
no,
go
no.
ahead.
See, this is what you're falling into, David. I
Okay.
expect better of you. This
State your
is
position.
so during the NFL draft weekend when Jalen Hyatt was drafted fourth, fifth round,
Yep.
whatever it was.
Yep.
Ohio State fans went crazy on social media about, see, this shows that Harrison should have won the Biletnikoff. What did the two have to do with each other? Nothing. And so I called out Ohio State fans get this, Michigan fans, I do this because I'm fair and unbiased. I said, Ohio State fans, the dumb fan base of the day. They are the dumb fan base of the day. They cannot put two and two. What do the two have to do with one another? They don't. The NFL draft selection doesn't justify an award or not justify an award given in college. So that had nothing to do with it. Marvin Harrison should have won the award because he was the best wide receiver in college football, not because Jalen Hyatt was drafted in the 5th round.
Oh, I agree with that. Although I thought I remember your video that you did do the side-by-side comparison with Hyatt's stats compared to Marvin's stats last year. And I thought you were making the case at the time that maybe Hyatt, based on his stats, could have gotten, and it was very close last year statistically between Hyatt and Harrison.
Oh, statistically, it was extremely close. If that's all you go by, going back to my previous point about 2023. But if you watched football and you know the ability of the players, then it shouldn't have been that close.
Well, as I've often to say, and this would have been one of those things that would have been interesting to have voted on after the bowl season. Ask Georgia who was tougher to defend last year.
Exactly.
Ask the Georgia defensive players who was tougher to defend, and who better to judge an athlete than against their peers. So, I did want to. Oh, by the way, I found out something interesting on Tony's podcast. By the way, and here's one for you, Mark. And you're gonna have to help me out on this because I forget who the 5th receiver was. Only 5 receivers in the history of the Big Ten have won the Silver Football Award. Did you see that for the Big Ten?
And the Silver Football Award goes to the offensive MVP, correct?
Yeah, in the Big Ten, yeah.
Okay, so Marvin Harrison's one.
Yes.
Braylon Edwards.
Okay.
David Boston.
Nope. David Boston did not get it.
When did they start this award?
I believe they said the guys had said it was like almost 100 years old or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's been around for like a while.
But I can't imagine anybody was.
Well, let's put it this way. There's no 40s or 50s or 60s guys in there, Mark.
Okay, so it starts in the maybe 70s or 80s. Okay, Desmond Howard.
Okay, good job.
I got 2 other ones. I'm going to go with. Just because I want to save time here and not be sitting here for 45 minutes, I'm going to throw out Al Toon.
No.
All right.
Right decade, though. Right decade.
Oh, in the 80s. Okay. Well, then we would have had probably Andre Rison.
No.
Chris Carter.
No. Well, let's put it this way, Mark. We would make Team Up North fans really happy, which is not my goal in life, obviously.
Anthony Carter.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did I miss? Do we have one more to go?
Well, there's one more, and I needed you to help me out with it. He played at Northwestern in the early 90s, in like 92.
Oh, that's funny you say that because this is who I had in mind, but I can't come up with his name.
Ferdinand had the name, and it totally slipped my mind. That's why I was asking you as a question, also so you could help me out with it. It was the name was very, very difficult to pronounce, and I know you probably would know this. Of all people, Mark, I was thinking you did.
Well, it's funny. As soon as you brought up the topic, actually, this player is the first player I thought of, but I can't think of his name. Yeah, I'm gonna look it up here. Is what I'm gonna do.
Please do.
I
I was on my phone.
Person I thought of.
Yeah, He had won it in 92 with Northwestern on like a 2-win football team.
Yeah, he caught like a zillion passes for that day and time. All right, David. Anything
Yeah.
else we need to hit on here?
Well, I did want to ask you, are you, and maybe you've already done this, are you doing a portal show, Mark, or have you already done a portal show?
Well, we did one on day 2 or 3, and we need to do some more. I was thinking of probably every day we could do one, but yes, we should do a portal show. And I was going to start to dive into portal rankings as well. Certainly have my thoughts
Somebody,
about,
I think
especially
it
this
just,
quarterback position. Yeah.
Lee Gissendaner, I believe is the name, Mark. Is that sound right?
Lee Gissendaner. Now, that's not who I was thinking of, but Lee Gissendaner, yes. Okay, so the thing about what's funny about Lee Gissendaner?
Go ahead.
He went to my high school. We crossed
Really?
paths. He was a sophomore or freshman when I was a senior. He led the Big
Wow.
Ten in punt return. He went and played for the Houston Oilers and was a really good punt returner with the Oilers for a few years. Didn't play receiver, I don't think, much. Lee Gissendaner. Yes, Northwestern. Yeah.
Yeah.
Played at Stowe
Those are the
High School.
5 receivers to ever with Pride of Stowe, him and Larry Zonka, right, Mark?
Stowe High School. Yes.
That's
People
right.
are sometimes impressed when I say I knew, and I didn't play with a basketball player because I didn't play basketball, but we had an
Yeah.
NFL player to that caliber who actually was a silver award winner in the Big Ten. And we also had a first round NBA draft selection 2 years ahead of me.
Right.
First round
Well, you
NBA
also had
selection.
right, and Zonka. Didn't Zonka ever come speak at the school,
Well, he
Mark,
was a
there
little bit
when you
before
were
my
there?
time, but yes, of course.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I knew you weren't that old, Mark. All right, always a pleasure to talk college football. So portal show maybe down the road or another one coming
Yes,
up?
absolutely. We've already done one. We will do more. Yes.
Okay. Well,
You
I
bet.
will look
Lee
for that, Mark.
Gissendaner. I was thinking of somebody else. Okay. That's
All right.
funny. Yeah.
There's one
All
for
right,
the
David.
books right there, Mark. Take care of yourself.
Appreciate it. We will keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. We've got Steve Helwick standing by from SB Nation to break down some bowl games for us. Steve, thank you so much for being here. Apologize. We had a caller jump on just seconds before you got here, or I would have, of course, put you first in line. But thank you so much for stopping by. We go to Steve for his group of 5, just vast knowledge of all these teams that I can't keep track of.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Really looking forward to the first week
Yes.
of bowl games.
So let me ask you this. We got 7 bowl games on Saturday. Is there one matchup that you like the best?
Well, I'm going to one of them. I will be covering the Independence Bowl between Texas Tech and Cal, the bowl game closest driving distance to me. So Shreveport, Louisiana, it'll be my first time there. But I know those are 6-6 teams, but I like that matchup mainly because of the running backs, Taj Brooks, Texas Tech, and Jaden Ott, Cal. These are, I think, both running backs have exceeded 140 yards 5 times this year. So I really love that running back matchup. You have 2 quarterbacks who weren't the starters to start the season, and Mendoza and Morton, who have developed into the guy for the future. So I think that's a compelling quarterback matchup. I understand both of these teams are 6-6, but I feel like a win could really change kind of the direction of both programs. We thought that last year when Texas Tech won the Texas Bowl, it didn't really come to fruition with that 0-2 start this year, but perhaps this could be kind of a springboard win for Texas Tech. And then Cal, if you look at Cal, they didn't really have bad losses this season. They only lost to pretty good teams for the most part. If they could hit a field goal against Auburn week 2, that would have been a win, a big non-conference win for them. I know Auburn was 6-6 and didn't really beat bowl teams, but other than Cal, but still that would have been a good win for them. And I think Cal could cap this season and win 4 of their last 5. They got a big win over UCLA, win over a Washington State team that might be the best team that's not going bowling this year, them or TCU. So I think this is going to be a fun Independence Bowl to cap off the night on Saturday.
All right, Steve, let's take everybody through the day. 11 a.m. Eastern time. So get your breakfast, get set. I'm going to be locked in from kickoff. We've got Georgia Southern taking on Ohio in the Myrtle Beach Bowl. What are your thoughts about that matchup?
Yes, Ohio is an excellent defense. There aren't too many teams in the country. Michigan's one of them. I think Ohio's the other that has both a top 10 run defense and a top 10 pass defense this year, which shows how excellent the Ohio Bobcats have been on that end of the field. Now, Ohio hasn't really had the offensive output that they wanted this year, and it's going to take more of a hit because their starting quarterback, Curtis Rourke, he announced his transfer to Indiana today. He will be part of Signetti's initial team there in Indiana. So Ohio's going with their third string QB, Parker Navarro, because their second string CJ Harris, who won the Arizona Bowl last year, is out for the year with a medical condition. Now, Parker Navarro has played before. He was a former UCF quarterback. He played week 2 when Rourke was injured. But the thing is, Navarro's not just the passing yards leader on the roster heading into this game. He's the rushing yards leader, too. So Ohio's down their top 2 running backs, the guys who got all the carries this year, and C.A. Bangura and O'Shawn Allison. So Parker Navarro is going to be the dual threat quarterback that has to lead both aspects of the offense, but he's going to need this to be a defensive-driven game, as many of Ohio's wins have been this year. Ohio wins in low-scoring fashion. They're 4th in total defense in the country. They're 5th in scoring defense, only letting up 15.4 points per game. So if Ohio can keep things good on that end, they have a star linebacker, Bryce Houston. I think he was an All-American selection by some of the many selectors, and he's a star tackler. He's everywhere on the field. He's a name you're going to want to watch, number 32 on Ohio. And they're going to counter a Georgia Southern team that likes to pass the ball. It's funny because Georgia Southern used to be known for that triple option and how often they ran the ball, and it's gone complete opposite now under Clay Helton. They pass the ball more than anyone else in the country. And as I was saying yesterday, their quarterback, Davis Brin from Tulsa, he kind of reminds me of 2019 Jameis Winston in the NFL, in a quarterback that's going to pass for a lot of yards. You're going to get a lot of touchdowns with him, but you're also going to get a lot of interceptions because he's not afraid to take risks. Now, Georgia Southern's top 5 in the country in interceptions thrown this year, but they also pass the ball pretty well and push it downfield through the passing game. They have really good skill position players on this Georgia Southern roster too. I really like their running back, Jalen White, and their receivers, Caleb Hood and Derwin Burgess. So they have a full skill position set of their main guys that are going to be playing in this game. So it's going to be a kind of a contrast of styles between Georgia Southern's really good offense and Ohio's stellar defense. And just other stats to know is Georgia Southern carries a 4-game losing streak going into this game. Started 6-2, had a close loss to Wisconsin where they led in the second half, well into the second half, and they kind of just collapsed later in the season. And then another stat you want to know about Ohio is Ohio's done really well in bowl games, 4-0 in their last 4 bowl games, including an overtime win over Wyoming in the Arizona Bowl last year. So I really like this matchup. Hard one to get a read on, just with not the uncertainties for Ohio, but Ohio's defense is good enough to beat many teams.
All right, Steve, a little bit later in the day, of course, at 2:15 Eastern, we go to New Orleans. Jacksonville State, of course, just moving to FBS play, playing in their first Division I of sorts, FBS bowl game. Louisiana has, of course, notched the most appearances in the New Orleans Bowl, and that's the matchup at the RNL Carriers New Orleans Bowl. They've been hosting, they've been the sponsor for quite some time. That's kind of a rarity in college football.
I know. I'm not sure. I think it's some shipment company, R&L Carriers, but just shout out to them because I recognize them. That's brand recognition for having that bowl for so long. So, yeah, it's the 23rd New Orleans Bowl in Louisiana. They appear in it all the time. This isn't the Louisiana dynasty that they were in the Billy Napier era where they're running the Sun Belt, but they've gone into bowl season at 6-6 the last 2 years, had a close loss to Houston, and really, I thought, punched above their weight in that game last year. And then this year, they're going 6-6. They won on the last week to beat ULM, and they're facing Jacksonville State. Thing to know about Louisiana, this is a very offensive-centric team. Their defense wasn't the best this year, but their offense, that was what determined winning and losing. They had over 30 points in all 6 of their wins this year, and they even had multiple losses where they scored above 30 points. So things are usually on the offensive side of things, lots of points in games that involve Louisiana. They have a really good run game led by a power back and Jacob Cabotes, 6'1", 225-pound back, really good at shedding tackles. And they're going to try to run things through the run game there. Now, their quarterback, Chandler Fields, he passes more than the other quarterbacks that they had this year. Ben Woldridge, their original starter, who was out for the season, and then Zion Chris, who suffered a season-ending injury. So, yeah, Chandler Fields is a guy now. And if you want to beat Jacksonville State, I think passing over them is the best way to go because Jacksonville State has a very good run defense. So I think Louisiana might want to shift up some of their game plan here, try to keep this one a little more aerial in order to beat Jacksonville State and win what would be their 6th New Orleans Bowl. They're 5-1 in their history there. And on Jacksonville State, what a story this year, jumping from the FCS to the FBS level and getting 8 wins in your first season, 7 over FBS competition. And they were clearly the 3rd best team in the CUSA this year. Their only losses in conference, which was a round robin conference play, were to Liberty and New Mexico State, who ended up participating in the Conference USA championship game. So Jacksonville State was a very good team all year. And even their losses weren't really ever in embarrassing fashion, losing on a game-winning field goal to New Mexico State. They hung in there with Liberty for a bit. And then their other losses were South Carolina and Coastal Carolina, lost by about 10 to 14 points to both of them. So Rich Rod did a really good coaching job his first year there. He got some Louisiana Monroe transfers there. He used to be a coordinator at Louisiana Monroe, and those guys have served that Jacksonville State team really well this year. One of them is their leading running back, Malik Jackson, and this is a very run-heavy team, just kind of like Louisiana. So Jacksonville State really likes to ground the ball. Their number 1 running back, Malik Jackson, is from Louisiana Monroe, and so is their top outside linebacker, Quay Drake, who's one defender you want to watch there. So Rich Rod, he helped build this team a lot through the portal. And Jacksonville State, they run a creative up-tempo offense that's very run-centric, a lot of RPO, a lot of QB runs with their quarterback, Zion Webb, who kind of took over from Nebraska transfer Logan Smothers midseason to be the full-time starter. So I think it's going to be an interesting game. I think it's going to be a quick game with how often these teams like to run the ball. And it's an interesting one. If it's a lower scoring game, I'm going to pick Jacksonville State. If there's points and this thing breaks above 25, 26 points, then I like Louisiana on this one if it's in a track meet form.
Doc P in the chat. Yes, you are correct. There was a Super Bowl played at Tulane Stadium, which has been demolished and no more for a long, long time. But that was the Vikings Steelers 1975 Super Bowl. All right. Now talk about brand recognition. The only reason this connects with me is the commercial ran through so many college football games this season where the coach has to demote the starting quarterback, and he's got an avocados from Mexico tray, and so that the quarterback doesn't care that he's getting benched because he's got the avocados from Mexico tray, and then he tells the assistant coach to go get the kicker. So you got the avocados from Mexico Cure Bowl, which used to just simply be the Cure Bowl. Miami of Ohio, MAC champions. Excellent defense. We just named Ty Wise as the Defensive Player of the Year in the MAC. Appalachian State, of course, the only team to defeat James Madison this year. And so those two, Steve, get together.
Yes, it's always fun when you have a bowl game that has 2 conference championship participants. You have one winner, Miami, Ohio, who won the MAC on a really good defense this year. And Miami, they're very similar to the Ohio Bobcats, where their offense didn't really produce as much as they thought they would this season, but the defense just held firm throughout the year. They were 7th in scoring defense this year, and they were a very strong unit against the run. They had the best run defense in the MAC last year, and the unit stayed very strong this year. And they won that Toledo game 23-14 by forcing a few turnovers, winning field position battle. And the offense wasn't really scoring touchdowns. They just hit field goals. And speaking of that, we have to shout out Miami, Ohio's best player, who's their kicker, Graham Nicholson, the first MAC player ever to win the Lou Groza Award. 26 of 27 on field goals this year, tied former Washington Huskies kicker Chuck Nelson with 25 straight field goal makes, which is the FBS record. So he made his first 25 to start the year before missing one in the MAC championship, but he was still MVP with a 3 of 4 performance in that game. So Miami gets in field goal range. They're pretty automatic with Nicholson, and that's going to be a big factor in this game because I don't know how much Miami is going to reach the end zone. Henry Hessen is their quarterback. He hasn't played since 2022. He played very sparingly against an FCS team in 2022 in their game against Robert Morris. But their starting quarterback, Brett Gabbert, suffered a really brutal injury in October. And then their backup, Avion Smith, who went undefeated this year, he went to the transfer portal. So it's Henry Hessen right now. And Miami's going to probably try to rely on the run game. Rashad Amos, their transfer running back from South Carolina, did them really well this year, especially after Gabbert came out and leading that running attack. So Miami's going to try to get things through the ground. They do have a star receiver, Gage Larvadain, who's committed to coming back this year. And a lot of these Miami guys have committed to coming back this year and running it back for a 2024 MAC championship. Their defense is really strong. MAC Defensive Player of the Year, Matt Salopek, he's just a tackle machine. Then you have good pass rushers all around. Mark mentioned Ty Wise. So I think that Miami's defense is going to be the unit which controls this game for the most part. App State, they started out the year a little cold, but toward the end of the year, they got a little hot until the Sun Belt Championship game where they lost 49-23. Quarterback Joey Aguilar, fun fact about him is the top 3 in touchdown passes this year are Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix, and then he's tied for 3rd there. So he's up there with all the Heisman guys, the Heisman finalists in the passing touchdowns department. So Joey Aguilar, he's someone who's going to get 300 yards a lot of time, multiple touchdown passes, and he was very efficient, 33 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. So he had a very good touchdown interception ratio there. They're without their top running back, Nate Noel, but I don't think that's too big of an issue because Kanye Roberts kind of stepped into that number 1 running back role at the end of the season anyway, had a 100-yard game late in the season, did pretty well in the Sun Belt Championship game. And one thing I think about App State is this is a team that likes to force interceptions. So we're first-time starting quarterback with Miami. App State is going to try to take control of the turnover battle. Tyreek Funderburk's a cornerback you want to watch in this game who's really good at ball skills, gets his hands on a ball really well. So I think that this could be a lower-scoring defensive game. So it's how much is Miami going to allow? Because as I said with Jacksonville State earlier, a lower scoring game favors a certain team. In this instance, it would be the Miami Redhawks.
Got Steve Helwick here from Underdog Dynasty and also Hustle Belt of SB Nation. Check out Steve's work right there. And I have no idea who this sponsor is. I've never heard of them. Isleta? Do you know what they do?
I do not, but I'm familiar with it from just the New Mexico Bowl.
Okay, we've got the New Mexico Bowl. New Mexico State stays close to home. And of course, a couple claims to fame here. They march on to the conference championship game before they succumb to Liberty, of course. And then they defeated Auburn by 3 touchdowns as a roughly 25-point underdog in that game, taking on the Bulldogs of Fresno State, Steve.
Fun bowl fact. Only one team has ever had a bowl win without a bowl loss. And that's New Mexico State. And they have 4 bowl wins, 0 bowl losses, and 1 tie. New Mexico State famously went from 1960 to 2017 without going bowling. They stormed the field after beating Utah State in the 2017 Arizona Bowl, which you never see at a bowl game. That was kind of a fun scene there. And then last year, they took Bowling Green in the Quick Lane Bowl, and they won that game, and they won it from the gritty play of their quarterback, Diego Pavia, who anybody who's watched him this year, who he made a big name for himself in those midweek CUSA football games earlier this year. He was in the CUSA championship game. He is a tough, fun quarterback to watch. And he's 5th among rushing quarterbacks this year, one of 5 quarterbacks to have 850 rushing yards, and he's a pretty good passer too. And the whole offense runs through him. And he's just one of those fun college players. I don't know what his future would be in the NFL. He's 6 foot, 200 pounds, but he's just a gritty, tough quarterback. We saw him suplex slam an Auburn defender after a play and get penalized for it. He's just a fun player to watch, and that's going to be one reason you want to watch this game for sure. Is Pavia is always electric when he's on the field, and they have good running backs too. And Star Thomas, Monty Watkins averages over 10 yards per carry. He just comes out of there like a bullet and gets breakaway runs. New Mexico State's offense is fun. It was a team that didn't hit their stride right away. They started 2-3. They had a questionable loss to UMass, a questionable loss to Hawaii, and everything clicked on those midweek CUSA football games. Was a CUSA a bit weaker this year than normally? Yes, it was. But New Mexico State took full advantage of that, and they were playing so well that when they went into Auburn at Jordan-Hare, they just obliterated them 31-10, and Pavio was a big reason for that. Had 3 touchdown passes, an efficient game, and the running backs did their job against Auburn, while the defense, which was vastly improved throughout the year from when they gave up 41 to UMass on week 1. So Jerry Kill has coached a really good job this year at New Mexico State, and I'm very impressed with what he did. This program has almost less funding than anyone in the FBS. It was a job that people didn't think you could win at for so long. And when they were winning, like in 2017 and 2022, they were getting to bowl games at 6-6. This year's team got 10 wins before bowls even started. Yes, they played an extra game because of the Hawaii extra game kind of ordeal, but still, New Mexico State, great job this year. Fresno State is a team that's going in the opposite direction of New Mexico State. They started 8-1. They looked like they were going to be in that New Year's Six picture, and then they forgot how to defend the run. Teams were getting over 300 yards rushing on them. San Jose State did it. New Mexico did it. Fresno State dropped some questionable games to some bad New Mexico and San Diego State teams that I think both went 4-8 toward the end of the year. So Fresno State had quite a slide in November. They still have their quarterback, Mikey Keene, the transfer from UCF, who famously beat Florida in the 2021 Gasparilla Bowl. He's been pretty good for the most part this year, but Fresno State hasn't been able to help him with a good running game on the side. So if they can get that established, that would be huge. But in this one right now, I just like New Mexico State, the way everything's trended with them, while Fresno State's kind of slid to end the year. And Fresno State will be without head coach Jeff Tedford, who is taking this game off with health issues. So they will have an interim coach, their linebackers coach, coaching them for this one.
When I hear the name New Mexico Bowl, for some reason, I typically think of the Arizona-New Mexico game about 5 or 6 years ago with Rich Rodriguez coaching Arizona, and they held on for, I believe, a 49-48 win over New Mexico in that game.
Nevada, 49-48. Yes, I remember.
Nevada. They were playing Nevada in that game. Okay, that's
yes.
right.
They scored. They were down. It was 49-48. So they were down 48-35 in the final minute, and they scored a touchdown. I think either in Nevada, there was either an onside kick or a fumbled kickoff or something. And Arizona then scored the game-winning touchdown in the final seconds to win 49-48. I know I mixed that one up with the Washington State, Colorado State one that also had a similar ending. That was probably like 2013. But yeah, we had some really good New Mexico Bowls for a few years. Yeah, 2013 New Mexico Bowl, 48-45, Colorado State, Washington State. Another game where Colorado State was down 15 with 3 minutes left and scored 3 times in the final couple minutes to win that game. So we've had some thrilling New Mexico Bowls in the early 2010s.
Absolutely. We've got a more recognizable stadium and matchup in terms of name brands. UCLA and Boise State playing at SoFi Stadium in the LA Bowl, the bowl game that we've seen match up the SEC and the Pac-12 the last couple of years. Let's see. No, we had Oregon State and Florida last year. The year before was Washington State and Fresno State, or am I flipping those 2 years? Anyway,
you're understandably mixing it up because the LA Bowl is essentially what the Las Vegas Bowl used to be. They always put the Las Vegas Bowl in the same slot on ABC, Mountain West versus Pac-12, and then they moved the Las Vegas Bowl to like a Big Ten bid. So yeah, the LA Bowl was, I think, Washington State versus Fresno State last year, and the year before it was Utah State, Oregon State. It was, and then last year Oregon State and Florida played in the Las Vegas Bowl, not the LA Bowl. So they're easy bowls to mix up because both in NFL stadiums now, Las Vegas used to have the same tie, and basically the LA Bowl matchups replaced it with the bids. But
my memory's failing me. UCLA, tremendous performance in a slight upset of USC. So they win the big rivalry game, still have a game to play, and just get blown off the field against Cal. Of course, Dante Moore is put himself in the transfer portal. I would think Ethan Garbers is going to get the call here against Boise State, which of course made a remarkable run once Andy Avalos was dismissed, to win as a 5-5 team and then make a march on to win the Mountain West Conference Championship game with Ashton Genty at running back.
Yes, the UCLA's end of the season was so confusing. I mean, they were a pretty good team. They had kind of close-ish losses to Utah and Oregon State. And then they lost 3 of their last 4, but they had enough to dominate USC in that one game. But a loss to Arizona State at home by 10, a loss to Cal at home by 26. Very confusing end to the season for UCLA. I don't know what to make of the team. I mean, it was the offense that was failing in those later games in the season. And UCLA's defense is incredible, especially their run defense. They were second in the country this year in stopping the run, only trailing James Madison yards allowed per game. And it was a very stellar unit, 11th total defense, 15th scoring defense. UCLA's defense, and they have the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year in Laiatu Latu, but he's going to prepare for the NFL draft. He won't be in this game, but I still like UCLA's front 7. I like the Murphy twins. I think that they can be good pass rushers that can pick up the slack for Latu's absence. So I do think that UCLA has a very good front 7, and most of the guys besides Latu are playing in this game. So I think that that's going to be the unit that controls this one. So it was a confusing end of the year for UCLA. Their offense has been really inconsistent all year, other than really the Stanford game. And I guess that USC game too, their offense wasn't really world beaters this year, like I kind of expected them to be. But I like their running back duo of TJ Harden and Carson Steele. Carson Steele was one of my favorite players to watch at Ball State. He was like the king of action last year. So I think that running back duo is going to be a good one to watch. Boise State's a bit average on defense, but Boise State, they found out their offense later in the year when after Avalos is firing, they were finally using their quarterback, Talon Green, right? But Talon Green's off to Arkansas in the portal, another just unfortunate side effect of transfer portal with bowl season. But Boise State still has a really good running back duo, Ashton Genty, who you mentioned earlier. He's going to run it back next year with the Broncos, and he is a tremendous running back in a long line of great Boise State backs. Doug Martin, Jeremy McNichols. Seems like Boise State is always loaded at that position. So, and George Halani is a pretty good number 2 also. So Boise State's going to try to establish their offense through those backs, especially with their top receiver, Eric McAllister, out of this game. But Boise State, they showed a lot of heart late in the season after that 5-5 start. But when you do look at Boise State's schedule, their non-conference schedule was brutal. Washington, you have UCF, and then their other game was Memphis, who was a very good underrated team this year. Those Memphis and UCF games, they lost by a combined 5 points. And then their only other slip-ups was a close loss to Fresno State when Fresno State was actually playing well. And then that wacky loss to Colorado State where they blew a 3-touchdown lead in the final 4 minutes. But Avalos got fired, and it seemed like the team really rallied around Spencer Danielson, who's been a longtime assistant there. So Danielson was undefeated with Boise State this year, had a pretty good win in the Mountain West Championship game, a very offensive-oriented game. So I'll see how Boise State does with their new quarterback, CJ Tiller there. He's going to make his first career start, hasn't taken a collegiate snap, and he's going to be the one that's going to try to wrap up the season and try to get Boise State its 9th win this year. So it'll be an interesting one to see how he does against that UCLA front, which has given so many offenses a lot of havoc this year.
Great stuff, Steve. Appreciate you stopping by. And again, you're going to be in Shreveport for Texas Tech Cal, correct?
Yes. And then Frisco Bowl on Tuesday for UTSA Marshall.
Okay. Texas San Antonio Marshall. Do you know any assignments after that?
Yes, I've already got my credentials approved to the Arizona Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl. So those are December 30th and January 1st. So I'm going to do 2 in the early slate and 2 in the late slate.
And I was just looking at the Frisco Bowl, and now I can't remember who's in it.
UTSA and Marshall.
Oh, that's the then you're going to be going where before the Fiesta?
Arizona Bowl, Wyoming, Toledo.
That's it. Okay.
That's in Tucson at University of Arizona.
Yes. Okay. Great stuff. Well, Steve, certainly let us know if you'd like to jump on after one of these games and do some post game. But otherwise, enjoy the travel and enjoy the ball games. It's bowl season. There's nothing like it. Appreciate you being here, Steve. I think we may have lost Steve there at the end. Fortunately, we got all the previews in, but that was Steve Helwick from SB Nation's Underdog Dynasty and Hustle Belt. All right. Let's keep it moving here at the Voice of College Football. What do you find folks talking about in the chat? I can only imagine. Maybe somebody should write a song along those lines. Mike Ford, where'd that go? Michigan is number 1 in FPI. Very valid figure there. Very valid metric, the FPI. Strength of record. J.J. McCarthy is number 1 in QBR, number 2 in completion percentage, which everyone says is our weakness. All right. Let's look at today's comings and goings, shall we? And what we've got here is the transfer portal. That's what I'm alluding to there. This just came down here in the last 2 hours. And we've got Texas A&M transferred Tyreek Chappelle. He's got 3 official visits coming up. All right. We learned here in the last hour, Malik Murphy. Okay, we already knew about that. Where is he going to land? Malik Murphy of Texas. You've probably not seen him actually play a game. Maybe you've seen a Texas spring game. He's a beast. He's got a rocket arm. Look at his trips coming up to Duke, who lost Riley Leonard. Baylor, who lost Blake Shapen. Oregon State also lost a quarterback, DJ Uiagalelei. Do we see a trend here? Georgia lost Brock Vandegrift to Kentucky. And Washington, who lost starting quarterback Michael Penix to the NFL draft. More portal news. Confirmed at Cardinal Authority. Alabama wide receiver transfer Ja'Cory Brooks, former 5-star South Alabama wide receiver Colin Lacey, and Duke D lineman Aeneas Peebles also visiting Louisville this weekend. Jeff Brom getting the job done, or attempting to, after a fine first season with the Cardinals. We have a commitment there. Is that A.J. Duffy? It is. Former Florida State quarterback A.J. Duffy. I guess he doesn't want to play for a team that doesn't make the college football playoff. He instead wants to play for the Aztecs of San Diego State. We have a former Houston defensive lineman, Chidozie Nwankwo, expected to visit with Coach Deion Sanders. We've got Penn defensive back transfer, Kendron Smith. Heard a lot about him being a really good player. Visiting Virginia. Huge weekend for Louisville. We just looked at that. They are also getting visits in from a couple familiar names. Miami running back Donald Chaney and Indiana athlete Jalen Lucas going to Louisville this weekend. It's like recruiting visits all over again. Ja'Cory Brooks to Louisville. We talked about that. Who is this? Indiana football. I did not see this. So very excited to announce that I'm committing to Indiana University. That is Curtis Rourke, the former Ohio quarterback. 4 hours ago, NC State has landed a commitment from UConn transfer tight end Justin Jolie. Caught 56 balls, 2 touchdowns last year with the mighty UConn Huskies. We've got Mississippi State transfer tight end Ryland Goad going to visit A&M. Coach Mike Elko. Aiden Childs, this is breaking here in the last 5 hours. I did not see this. Aiden Childs, this should not be a big shock to anyone. Oregon State transfer following his head coach, Jonathan Smith, to Michigan State. That's a big pickup for Sparty. We've got UCLA transfer tight end Carson Ryan is committed to Utah. So he's going to be playing with the Utes in the Big 12. LSU tight end transfer Jackson McGowan has committed to Wisconsin. We've got a kicker transferring, Mitch Jeter, South Carolina to Notre Dame. This one has been talked about quite a bit. Georgia edge transfer Marvin Jones, highly recruited, just like any other Georgia player, visiting Florida State this weekend. Of course, legacy there with Marvin Jones, the great Marvin Jones. Tyler Barron is going to make a trip to Ole Miss, the former edge rusher at Tennessee. Oh, this was a big one. This has been a huge one in the last day. Rocket Sanders, tremendous Arkansas running back, has committed to South Carolina. MJ Morris, this big as well. MJ Morris, who wrestled the starting quarterback job away from Brennan Armstrong, or maybe it was more or less handed to him by Brennan Armstrong, has left NC State. And of course, late in the season, MJ Morris decided that he wanted to redshirt and not play any more football for the rest of the season. That was a bit controversial. So he leaves NC State and goes to Maryland to play quarterback for Michael Locksley and Josh Gaddis. Mississippi. What am I missing here? Oh, Mississippi State cornerback Tamari Brown has re-entered the transfer portal. Let's not make a mistake and enter the transfer portal, leave the transfer portal, and then re-enter the transfer portal. He transferred to the Bulldogs after playing at Kentucky and Purdue. So here we go, folks. Here's a microcosm of it right there. We got a cornerback in Jamari Brown who played at Kentucky. Then he played at Purdue. Now he's at Mississippi State. Now he's going somewhere else. Well, he thought he was going to go somewhere else, but he went back to Mississippi State. No, now he is going to go somewhere else. Mississippi State received a commitment from North Texas transfer running back Ethan Miner. No, the number 2 overall center. Okay, this is a nice little pickup right here for Boston College. Former Florida State running back Trayshawn Ward also played at Kansas State the last 2 seasons. And so Robichaud, the number 1 running back there at BC, gets a running mate in Trayshawn Ward. Good pickup for Jeff Halfley. Brian Addison committed to UCLA on Wednesday, talked about finishing his career at the school he originally signed with 6 years ago. Brian Addison, UCLA commit and signee, goes to Oregon. 6 years later, he's back at USC as a transfer. DJ Lundy, who's had a decent career at Florida State, enters the transfer portal. Washington State standout wide receiver Josh Kelly going to transfer to Texas Tech, apparently, according to these crystal balls. And they just keep on coming, folks. How about we had a conversation earlier today. Check out the live stream with John Hoover of All Sooners on Fan Nation. We talked about all the Oklahoma running backs who have transferred. Marcus Major, Daylon Smothers, and Tyree Walker, who was their leading rusher for most of the season. They've all transferred. 3 Oklahoma running backs, talented running backs, take off. And so Oklahoma needed a running back, and they picked up UT Martin's Samuel Franklin, 1,300 yards, 12 touchdowns. Tom Loy, whoever that is, he must work for 247 Sports. He's keeping a close eye on the Syracuse Kyle McCord situation after Kyle McCord said he's not going to Nebraska. And again, we could just keep going on and on and on and on and on and on and on. Possible Michigan commit here with Western Kentucky transfer cornerback Upton Stout, who's a top 40 player in the transfer portal. Florida State is hosting DJ Uiagalelei, but set to host Cam Ward. And that is today. And Cam Ward's coming from Miami, where he visited. All right, let's go to the phone lines to Real MVP. I apologize. I did not see you down there.
No, you're good, Mark. You're good. How are you doing, Mark?
I am doing well. And I just went through like the last day's transfer news, and it just, wow, it's just crazy.
Yeah, you've got your usual suspects at the top of it, your Colorados, Arizona States, just getting recruit after recruit from the transfer portal. I mean, that's what they are at this point, is transfer teams, Mark. It's crazy what they do. But Mark, I want to talk about some of these bowl games. I mean, the fact Miami of Ohio might have made the college football playoff this year under the next year's format. I don't know if it was going to be them or Troy. But yet, Miami of Ohio is 6.5-point underdogs to App State. This is why, in my opinion, the G5 shouldn't get a bid at all. I mean, Mark, they have no chance. When I say no chance, obviously they have some chance. But let's be honest, they have basically no chance in any game they play against anyone good.
Do they have maybe a 0.9% chance, possibly?
I would honestly say even less than that.
Oh.
That's how low of a chance they have. It's crazy. I mean, I'd put it somewhere around 0.0001% chance of them actually winning a game. They're just not good enough. Your Liberties, your Miami of Ohio's, your Troy's, it'll be like when Ohio State played Western Kentucky. It'll be like 63-10 most years, in my opinion.
What do you think about it? Well, is that at the same time that we've expanded the playoff to formally include the group of five, comes at roughly the same time that the best schools in the G5 have left the G5. So the G5 is in worse condition than maybe it's ever been. And probably, I would say almost most definitely the three best, and we could throw in BYU, but the three best G5 programs at various times over the last 10 years all just left the G5. Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, and of course BYU.
Correct. And what's the point of them even going at this point, other than just getting a check? Nobody expects them to do anything. Who's going wanting to go to that playoff game? If you ask your average Joe on the street, your casual fan, hey, Washington is going to be playing Liberty in a playoff game, who's wanting to go to that, Mark? Seriously.
Well, this year it would have been Liberty and Florida State.
I'm going a little further because Washington would be in the Big Ten.
Okay, yeah, we can extend it to the new conferences. Well, it's almost going to, in a sense, take the place of, but be more important than. So it's actually a waste of time in that the worst game and the lowest rated BCS and now New Year's Six game is always the one with a group of five team in it. And this Liberty Oregon game, except for wanting to watch college football, and that's what I do, that's the least of these New Year's Six games by far that I'll want to watch. And that's going to be a playoff game next year.
Correct. And then if you're the 5 seed and you win that game, you get the 4th worst conference winner, which would have been what? Arizona this year? I mean, think about that as your 2 games to get into the Final Four. You get Liberty and Arizona. I mean, does that sound like an exciting draw to you, Mark?
It's not an exciting draw, but it's a coveted draw, is what it is.
Yeah, I think it will be coveted for the first 2 or 3 years. And then what I predict is happen is it will absolutely tank. I don't believe, now this is just me, maybe completely wrong. I don't believe people watch playoff games because they're playoff games. I believe people want to watch the best teams with the best athletes play. And I believe people are smart enough to realize, wait a minute, you're telling me this team that's 13-0 is going to be playing an 8-4 team or a 9-3 team? Oh, we're good. I think that's what will eventually happen, especially if that 13-0 team wins by like an average of 35 points a game.
Well, it is going to be exciting that first time. I don't know how long it's going to take, but we'll take your example, Liberty and Washington. Although Washington, the shine will be off the drama of this happening because it doesn't have quite the impact that it would if that's Georgia, Ohio State, Oklahoma, somebody like that. But anyway, regardless, the number 5 team in the country. And I don't know how long this is going to take, but it's going to happen sometime where we're looking at a 24-21 game in the fourth quarter. And that'll be exciting. It'll be like 116 in the NCAA tournament. That is a complete wipeout 90% of the time. But at one point, there was a, wow, this is scary for a 1 seed.
Yeah, but see, you would compare it to a 116 matchup. I know it's happened twice, I believe, since 2016 or 18, but before then it hadn't happened in like 30, 40 years.
Oh, I know.
Something crazy like that. So if we take that
forever.
long...
Virginia was the first one to lose, right?
Yeah, they lost to UNBC.
Yeah, that was what, about 5 years ago?
Yeah, and then last year Purdue lost to Fairleigh Dickinson University.
Yeah.
But my point
those
is,
teams are like 2 and 200 and something or something like that.
My point is, though, Mark, you get 4 matchups of that per year. You're only going to get one of these types of matchups, and college basketball is not college football.
No.
College football, the depth matters more, and there's less variance within the game.
Yeah.
So for it to only happen so rarely in college basketball, I think it's even going to happen significantly less in college football, in my opinion. I mean, how often in the regular season, when you got hundreds of games like this, where you got a team just vastly superior, how often does it happen?
Yeah, not very often. Plus, we get stuck with the football game. With the basketball game, you just move on to the other game. You just, okay, you got 4 choices. You just move on to something else and watch something else. But we are going to be stuck watching this game.
Correct. Because I believe a large part of the reason Florida State wasn't invited in the playoff this year was because of the TCU effect. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yes.
So how does it make sense that we're creating a system where you're basically more likely than not going to have a TCU type score every single year?
Well, are you talking about just the expansion of the playoff in general or including the group of 5?
Including the group in 5.
Because there was not a decision made by anyone to say, go play your own playoff, and you're not at that level to be playing in our playoff. Because there's no continuity, there's no agreement among all the conferences, or maybe they would have come to that determination if they worked together. Maybe they would have, I don't know. Or maybe it's just that they're dependent on that level of play to fill out their non-conference schedule, and they just want to keep the peace and have it be a workable situation.
I guess, but to me, it just, if you want to do it, just write them a check. Say, here's whatever amount of money, go away, have your own little thing. Like they don't belong, Mark, in any way.
You don't have any curiosity to see what it's going to be like?
No, they're going to get absolutely killed, Mark. I see no way they can win a game ever. I mean, they're going to win one eventually. You just do it long enough, but it's not going to happen. I don't believe it'll happen in my lifetime. They're just too bad. Liberty's 13-0 this year, and they're what, 18-point underdogs to Oregon?
Yes.
And Oregon's would be one of the worser teams that the group of 5 team could draw. The group of 5 team is probably going to get the second or third best team in the country every single year. They're going to play like an Ohio State, a Georgia, or Alabama type team usually. Yeah. They're not going to be playing an Oregon or even these middle, quote unquote, middle teams. They're going to be playing the elite of the elite every year.
And they're going to be playing them with incentive, not, okay, we're just going to play in Fiesta Bowl that is kind of an exhibition type setting.
Right. And that's the only reason I believe these group of 5 teams have a chance in the Orange Bowl, because you have players opting out and stuff. That's why I believe UCF a few years ago in 2017 won their game when Cincinnati almost beat Georgia. But you're telling them, hey, you got to make a playoff game. I think it'll be Georgia TCU all over again, where there's just a clear talent disparity. I mean, Mark, I talk about the talent disparity between Alabama and Michigan as if it's the size of the Grand Canyon. You want to know what the size of the Grand Canyon? Look at the talent gap between a Georgia and a Liberty, Mark. I mean, they're basically playing a different version of football, as sad as it's to say.
Well, I don't know what to tell you, except we only have to suffer through one of those games. The rest of the expansion to the playoff is pretty legit.
Yeah, I guess. It'll be closer, but I think there'll still be some bad matchups in the second round, like your Washington and Arizona State. And then whoever the 6-3 matchup is, I don't think it'll be as good either, because it'll be the ACC champion against the second best either Big Ten or SEC team, or even the third best SEC team in Big Ten. I mean, could you imagine Florida State going up against a Ohio State team this year, or a Texas, or Georgia? Georgia would be the third best SEC team this year. Next year, Mark.
Yes, technically.
Yeah, that's bad, Mark. That's bad for the ACC.
Yeah, the Big 12, I think that Utah, most people would believe to be the best program right now. Kansas State's in the running. We'll see what Deion Sanders continues to do with Colorado. Arizona was really good this year, of course, but yeah, it's going to be a tough ride for the Big 12.
Yeah, what's their best program they've got left? Oklahoma State?
Well, that's what I'm throwing out. I'm throwing out Utah, Arizona, Oklahoma State, Kansas State. Yeah, the 20th best programs in the country in that range.
Yeah, and yet they get an automatic top 4 bid. It's just, I don't like being treated like I'm an idiot, Mark, and this feels like I'm being treated like an idiot. We all know they're not this good. We all understand it, but we got to pretend they're a top 4 team when nobody believes it. And I see a comment that says it's fine when the SEC team plays one of those types of cupcakes next to the last game every year. Listen, that's smart scheduling. I agree it's not good football, Mark. It's like when the SEC plays 8 conference games. Is it weaker of the SEC to play 8 than 9? Yes. But is it objectively the right decision? Yes. If the SEC went to 9 conference games, half their team would have losses. But why should they? What incentive is there for the SEC to go to 9 conference games, Mark?
None, other than they might be able to cough up a little bit more money out of the TV networks, because they would have more interesting matchups. They would have more valid matchups to sell the networks. But that probably doesn't. They got plenty of money. They're doing just fine. That probably doesn't offset their incentive to have healthy teams, to have rested teams, and they already play enough big non-conference games.
Right, right. And I said it before the season came. I said Michigan's got a better chance of making the playoffs than Ohio State simply because Michigan decided to go Cupcake City in the non-conference schedule. Ohio State choosing to add Notre Dame did nothing to their season. I mean, if anything, whoever came up with that idea to schedule a home and home against Notre Dame did more harm to the Ohio State University than good. There was no benefit, Mark, other than the excitement of that game. It did nothing. Would you agree with me?
Well, as it turned out, we don't know what kind of impact playing a tough game on the road had to do with the team the rest of the season, but they of course won the game both times. But no, they didn't need it. It didn't help them, didn't boost them in any way. Now, the tricky part of that is going forward with this 10-2, 9-3 threshold being what's going to be the standard, especially in the Big Ten and the SEC, is I believe that those kind of games will hurt more teams than help them, but there will be a opportunity to help yourself when being compared against teams with like records if you played that kind of non-conference game.
I get that, Mark, but to me, the question is, can an 8-4 team make the playoff? If the answer is no, I don't see any reason why we should be scheduling big non-conference games at all. If the answer is yes, then I think there's some validity. Look at Alabama's schedule. They got Oklahoma, Georgia, LSU, Tennessee. I know Oklahoma, Georgia's going to be really good. If LSU's the lead, that they could have 3 losses, be one of the top 8 teams in the country. But they would be what, on the outside in at 9-3, Mark?
Yeah, if you look at the last 10 to 15 years and take the college football playoff rankings, and then even before that, take what would be the AP poll, if you're going to say that that's the equivalent or something close. 10-2, 9-3, that's the cutoff. You would not have 8-4 teams in the playoffs. Now, is the committee going to do a different job in ranking these teams? Especially if we're 5 years down the road and the SEC or the SEC and the Big Ten are dominating the games, will that start to turn into a different comparison? Your 10-2 Big 12 becomes an 8-4 in the SEC. Will it become that pronounced of a difference?
Right. Now I'm going to give an actual example. I'm not just speaking hypothetically about this, Mark, okay? I want to take Michigan's schedule next year, okay?
Yeah.
Let's say they lose to Oregon, Ohio State, Washington, all in conference, okay? They're 9-3. And that is somewhat possible, even though how good Michigan is this year. And well, they have scheduled a non-conference game against Texas. If they lose that game, they're 8-4. But if they win that game, if they scheduled Akron instead of Texas, would they be in the playoff, you think?
Yes.
But if they lose that game, are they out?
Yeah, they're out.
So why schedule that big conference opponent game then?
Unless, so I'm going to go back to what I said just a minute ago. There will be situations in which scheduling that game and either playing extremely well and losing to somebody who's really good or winning the game will help, but those instances are going to be far fewer than the times that it's going to hurt a team. So 9-3, 10-2 is going to be that threshold where 10-2, regardless of who you schedule non-conference, Michigan could continue to take on these awful non-conference opponents. It's not going to matter if they go 10-2; they're in. If they go 9-3, then there may need to be a Texas win, or if Texas is a top 5 to 10 team in the country, a really good performance against Texas in a loss.
I understand that with normal conferences, but my point is with the conferences expanding this year.
Yeah.
If Michigan goes 9-3, and I know the teams are going to change, but I'm just using this year. Washington's the second best team in the country. Oregon's a top 8th team. Ohio State's one of the 5 best teams in the country, probably. They could lose that game, all 3 of those games, and still be one of the 10 best teams in the country, Mark.
Yes.
So it just doesn't make sense. And I see Mike Ford in the comments section saying, if we lost 3, I'm good if we get left out. So if the goal is just to get 10 wins, why not schedule FCS games? Why is the SEC punished for scheduling Furman's and Chattanooga's the second week of the season? You're telling me as a Big Ten guy, the only thing that matters mostly is your record. So why not just schedule absolute garbage in non-conference games? I don't think we can have it both ways of saying, well, you have to schedule major non-conference opponents, but then completely punish them if they lose to those major non-conference opponents.
Yeah. So, for example, what is more impressive? A team that played 3 non-conference cupcakes, terrible teams, beat them 50-0 across the board, basically, or the team that played 2 of those kind of games, was just as impressive, won them 50-0, basically, and then had a game against Texas, who finishes 11-1, 12-1, and loses that game 31-27. Great game. Should that be evaluated as a better performance than going 3-0, where we really learn nothing about that particular team?
I think it should be.
I believe it should be as well.
Right.
That's
Absolutely
why
right.
I automatically just don't put Liberty in the top 25 just because they, at some point in the season, amass some magical number of wins. Why that's viewed by the AP voters to say, oh, they were 7-0 last week, not good enough to be in our top 25. Oh, they're 8-0, and they just beat one of the worst 5 teams in the country by 13 points. So we're now going to rank them because 8-0 just kind of feels right that they should. We're going to throw them a bone. Now they get ranked. That's almost the same type mentality of rewarding a team that just plays an awful schedule.
Correct. And I think the committee tipped their hand a little bit by going off of it this year of just perception. In my opinion, there's a legit argument Washington should have been the number 1 team in the country. Because at least in their non-conferences they went out on the road to play Michigan State. I know Michigan State's a bad football team, but at least they tried, Mark. They scheduled somebody and went on the road.
And they actually scheduled Boise State as well.
Right. But nobody even brought it up as, hey, should Washington be number 1 over Michigan? It wasn't even a talking point.
Which is a bit crazy when you think about it, because where's Michigan's... So let me back it up to this point. I saw this asked on Twitter by some college football site who had a better resume and was asking the same exact question you are, was making just a case for Washington to say, should this not have been posed or questioned in some way? And my thought was, okay, if I really analyze it, I believe that Michigan did have a better overall performance than Washington, but it was more about how well they played against those teams than that they played and beat better teams, because they did not. They just simply were dominant in most of their games, more so than, of course, Washington struggled against Stanford, Washington State, somebody else off the top of my head, Arizona State, and Michigan did not. But if you consider, even if you consider Ohio State and Penn State to be better wins than Oregon and Oregon again, and that's a close call, after that, Washington still beat Arizona, USC. Am I missing anybody else? Boise State. Oregon State. There you go. Okay, so look at Washington's next 3. If you consider that a stalemate, or even if you give the nod to Michigan, top 2 wins: Arizona, Oregon State, USC, 9-3, 8-4, 7-5, 3 pretty good teams. Michigan, Maryland, 7-5. That's it. And Tim Prangley just showed up in the chat, and he's going to love you brought it up, your position, my position on this Washington-Michigan comparison. Absolutely. And again, I put Michigan above because I also, in addition to evaluating the resume and the results, I also evaluate the level of play, and Michigan was dominant.
Yeah, I understand that as well, Mark. But from a principle standpoint, I felt like there should at least been a discussion that Washington should have been the number one team. Now, I see Mike Ford in the comments saying UNLV needs to be compared to Michigan State. Why are we on this UNLV train still, Mark? What has UNLV done that's so impressive? Did they go out and beat the 85 Bears this year or the 01 Ravens? I've never seen a group of 5 team that ended up, 8-4 or 9-3 be
8-4, I believe.
Talked about this much.
So
UNLV is a fine team, but they're not good.
9-4 after they lost to Boise State by 25
points. They lost to who, Mark? They lost to who in their conference championship game?
Boise State by 25 points.
Who did Washington beat in a non-conference game?
They beat Boise State by 35 points.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my. So you're telling me Washington beat a better team than Michigan did in beating UNLV?
And pardon me, I did the math incorrectly. 56-19 off the top of my head. 37-point win for Washington over Boise State. No, it's a great point. And you know what? In the chat, folks, Washington or Michigan, number 1 seed. Who should have been the number 1 seed? I firmly believe, not that you're all listening to us right this second, but DeReal and myself gave a pretty good rundown of the qualifications of both teams.
Right. I just got told by Mike. Now, I like Mike Ford. He's a great guy, but I just see comments from him that I just don't agree with. That's why I'm pointing them out. It's nothing against him. I see Mike Ford in the comments section saying that he's saying that giving out of conference credit for Michigan State is fraudulent. Saying Washington scheduling Michigan State out of conference is fraudulent, Mark.
What? Fraudulent in what way?
I don't know. That's what he said. You can pull it up.
But scheduling East Carolina, UNLV, and Bowling Green is legitimate.
I guess. I'm just reading the comment that was displayed to me.
Okay.
If he wants...
Mike, please. I understand. First of all, you're so biased, and that's fine. You are. Mike, you're our guy. Remember that. But come on. And don't say it's not close. It is close. Here we go. We got Mike here. Come on, Mike. It's close.
Okay, yeah, I figured I had to jump on this. The thing is that 2 years ago we beat a Washington team that was crap, but
Sure.
people kept dumping on our conference or out of conference. They kept dumping on our strength of schedule, even though we scheduled Washington. Washington was a Power 5 conference. They were a Pac team. They turned out to suck that year, but we still caught crap for it. So I mean, this seems only fair to rebut that.
Okay, can I possibly make a distinction here? This would be my distinction.
Go ahead.
There's intent, and then there is reality. And so the intent in that particular year was that Michigan went out and they scheduled one of the top 15 to 20 programs in college football. At whatever point the contract was signed, that was their intent. They have no control over Jimmy Lake sucking as a coach and Washington bottoming out one season at 4-8. And they wiped them out. They controlled the game. It was easy. So I didn't pile on Michigan and say, you didn't schedule anyone. Washington sucked. I didn't do that. But you still have to evaluate the team on the schedule. Those are two different things. The intent was there, but Washington sucked. When Washington schedules Michigan State, the Michigan State team that they played last season in Seattle was actually, this is crazy, Washington was unranked when they played Michigan State last year, and Michigan State was number 12 in the country because they were coming off of Kenneth Walker and 11-2 in the Peach Bowl win, and they were ranked in the top 12 in the country. And then Washington wiped them out. We know what happened. Michigan State went 5-7, and Washington went 11-2, top 10 in the country. And so then they wiped them out this year. But you can only schedule so many Oklahomas and Clemsons. There are only so many of those out there. So you take a risk. There's such a variance when you schedule UCLA or Michigan State. They could be 11-2 good. They could be 5-7. They could be whatever. But they're a legitimate school with a legitimate program that produces top 25 talent, Michigan State, but they sucked this past year. That's not Washington's fault, but they played a crappy football team, but the intent was there. Those are two different things in my eyes.
Okay, so I guess the conversation is, good intention versus good performance. Because if it comes down to performance, I take UNLV over Michigan State, and I hate throwing in that UNLV because it's going to be a tired narrative. But I, in my opinion, like I said, if it's a choice between Michigan and Washington at number one, this isn't even an almost, in my opinion.
Okay.
Hold on. Can we just go back to that point? Hold on. Why is UNLV better than Michigan State? What have they done to prove this?
Well, I think they have a top 20 offense.
Yeah, yes, but you understand you need to put all these numbers in context, and they're playing a far weaker schedule than what Michigan State is playing. Like, it's not even comparable, and this is why I talk about the group of five versus the Power Five. The Power Five opponent, in my opinion, should always get the benefit of the doubt compared to the group of five opponent. They're just two different levels of football for a reason.
Okay, and I get that, Michigan State has also played some tough games, but they've also played their share of Indiana's and Nebraskas and Rutgers. So, can we stop kind of hype them up a little bit?
Yeah, okay. Let's
hang on, Mike.
I was going to bring this up. Who did Purdue's a terrible Big Ten team,
yes.
But they beat. But they were in a very competitive game against Fresno State, a good to great Mountain West team.
Yep. And also think of this, Mike. If you're saying Michigan State's schedule wasn't that good, basically Michigan State's schedule was roughly what Michigan's was, right? They play in the same division. Okay. So 5 games are exactly the same and they play each other. So 6 games are exactly the same, except they had to play Michigan. They played Iowa and they played a non-conference game against one of the 10 best teams, that maybe one of the top 5 teams in the country, Washington.
Okay, yeah, and you'll never hear me say that Michigan State had a weak schedule. They had probably one of the toughest in the country. But and like I said, if they went 6-6, we're not having this conversation. But they went 4-8.
They went 4-8. And again, run down the best teams: Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Washington, Iowa, even Maryland. Okay, that's a pretty good schedule.
I don't know. I've been told that Maryland is not that good because they play.
I don't know what we're arguing at this point, but I think if we're taking Washington's resume and their schedule and comparing it to Michigan's, and we're debating Michigan State and UNLV, I think we need to be looking at far more significant games than that first before we get to that level.
But I know a lot of cases where a group of now did you say Fresno State? Wasn't it Fresno State that beat the absolute brakes off of Arizona State? In fact, didn't they shut them out? Didn't they shut out Arizona State? It was like 29-0 or something.
Yeah, but that just tells you how bad Arizona State as a football team is. That doesn't tell you how good Fresno State is.
Okay, let's go to your beloved conference when a 9-win New Mexico State went to Auburn and absolutely beat the stuffing out of Auburn.
Okay.
Yeah, but you're giving exceptions not to the general 90. What is it like? I get it. Auburn lost to New Mexico State. Congrats to New Mexico State. They can have a celebration. They can hang a banner. You want them to hang a banner, say, we beat Auburn? This is what the level we're talking. This is why it should at least be a conversation, because we're talking about this low level. How about we talk about the fact Washington had wins over Oregon State? How about we talk about the fact they beat Oregon twice? They beat a decent Utah team. They beat USC. They beat Arizona. Their quality of depth, in my opinion, is far greater than what Michigan had. And if we're having to go to the microcosm of, well, UNLV might be better than Michigan State, I think this should have been discussed way more.
This is the way to do it, Mike. And we already did this, if you were listening. Mike, list Michigan's best wins in order.
Okay, so Ohio State is the top win.
Okay.
Penn State.
Okay.
Iowa.
Okay.
Maryland.
Okay. And it doesn't matter after that. Does it really matter?
Then it's kind of toss between UNLV and Rutgers.
Okay. So we'll put both of those teams down. UNLV and Rutgers. Okay. The real Washington's
Oregon.
best wins. Okay.
Oregon.
Okay.
At Oregon State.
Yep.
Utah. Oh, sorry, Arizona.
Okay.
Utah.
Yeah, I forgot about that one. Yep.
USC.
Yep.
And that's all the winning teams they played.
Okay, so we've listed the same number of teams, but we've got Ohio State, Penn State, Iowa, Maryland, UNLV, and Rutgers versus Oregon, Oregon State, Arizona, Utah, and USC. It's just a much deeper schedule.
Okay, but the other thing is that, and it's something that, remember, I tend to disagree with you on when you do your top 25 that makes sense, is because I also do other metrics other than just who they play. I also look at how they play.
No. I do too. I don't know that you're understanding my top 25. And I said this, let me say this real quick, Mike, and then I'll let you go. Part of this conversation started with, I made a comment to DeReal that I responded to a tweet today because somebody wanted to know who deserved number one, who had a better performance over the season, Washington or Michigan. And I had to think about it. And then I finally put Michigan and defended Michigan, but I think it's very close. And the reason I selected Michigan was not because of the comparison of those two lists of wins. It was because Washington struggled against Arizona State. They struggled against Stanford. They struggled against Washington State. And Michigan struggled against no one who wasn't Ohio State.
Well, Maryland. Maryland was a struggle win.
Maryland. But they didn't struggle against bad teams. They dominated all the bad teams, all the marginal teams. Maryland would have been the closest to competing with them.
Yeah, and that's why I put Michigan over Washington, because I remember watching Arizona State, was it 15-7 or something? That was kind of an embarrassment. Yeah. Stanford was a one digit win. I originally had Arizona as a struggle win. Now I didn't know that Arizona was going to go out and do what they did, but I looked at the fact that Washington looked less than stellar in a couple of these games, whereas Michigan's one struggle win, and it's the same argument I made with Bama when I brought up how Bama, how they didn't look great against Auburn. They didn't look good against Arkansas. They didn't look against Texas A&M. They didn't look good against South Florida. And this is the reason why I was arguing that I would have kept them out and Florida State in, even though Florida State, looked marginal at certain stretches, but not as much as Alabama. Because I think that, margin of victory does matter. Even when you're counting, all of your 5-7, 6-6 teams that you're supposed to beat anyways.
I can agree with everything you just said, but my only issue is this wasn't even a discussion point.
Yes.
And it feels like it should have been a discussion point. It should have been one of those debate topics. It should have been.
Okay, maybe I will take out the it's not worth discussing. It's worth discussing, but I think that the discussion still ends with Michigan is a number one.
Right. I just think it was completely disrespectful for Washington because they played a deeper schedule than Michigan. They tried in their non-conference game against Michigan State, and yet everybody's like, okay, Washington's 2, and we're done. Like, it's just disrespectful, and it goes back to my original point of why schedule these massive non-conference games if they're not even going to be brought up, even if at a valid time. I mean, shoot, Michigan, next year Texas might go back to what they normally do and go 5-7. Should we just treat it if they go 5-7 as if they didn't even try?
I would think that you would have to evaluate them as a 5-7 team next year if it came down to Michigan being a bubble playoff team. I wouldn't judge them based off of, well, they were good when we scheduled them at the time, because that is immaterial to the 2024 season.
Well, I get that, but if their playoff game is that versus somebody like Michigan scheduled this year where they played all cupcakes, I think that category should be a factor. I don't know if it should be the deciding factor, but I think it should have some part of the equation. And I know, John D'Adamo, Michigan State's terrible. I understand that. But they're better than every single non-conference opponent Michigan played this year.
Like I say,
I understand the UNLV fans out there. Michigan's become UNLV's.
Okay, let's stop that right now. I'm just trying to look at this objectively. Not
I
every.
understand that. I just find it weird. Every Michigan fan's like UNLV. They're all reckless fans all of a sudden. The worst program probably in the history of the sport, as one of the largest fan bases now, probably.
Not every bad Power 5 team is better than every good Group of 5 team. And I think it's a legitimate conversation to attempt to break down the validity of how good a team is whenever one is 4 wins, despite a horrendous schedule. I give you that one right there, versus a 9 win. And one of the losses for that 9-win team is a team that beat them. They didn't really have a chance against, which was Michigan.
Do you know what we left out of this comparison? We left out the team. So we are 7 teams deep on this Washington schedule, and we left off the team that beat UNLV by 25 points and won the conference championship that lost to Washington by 37 points. If we're going to talk good Group of 5 teams, we're not even discussing the best of the 2 comparisons, the 2 lists, and that's Boise State.
Wasn't Boise State like 7-5 though?
Well, they won the conference. They went 8-5 and won the conference. And they were the best team in the conference. UNLV by 25 points.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to UNLV. They were cooking it until November hit, and all of a sudden they just, kind of dipped south. I don't understand how that one happened, but okay. Like I said, I will rescind the it's not an argument statement, but I'll still hold on to from a total body of work, which means the head-to-head that with the common opponent, which is Michigan State, that goes to Michigan's favor. When it comes to just overall dominance of their schedule, that goes. What?
The head-to-head of the one common opponent goes to Michigan. And I know why you're going to tell me, but you explain that to me, Mike.
Well, it's 49-0 versus 41-7.
You understand, once you get to a certain point in a football game, the score is completely inconsequential. There was no difference in if anything, Washington put up more yardage. Listen to this figure. They put up more yardage against Michigan State than any team in the history of Michigan State football.
Well, yeah, Washington's going to put up yards. That's what they're built to do.
Well, you can't say 41-7, 49. It's completely inconsequential, the 2 scores at that point. They both killed Michigan State.
Yeah, I give you that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so have we kind of settled this yet, or is the dead horse?
We've settled this. Can I ask you another question, Mark?
And again, Mike, just to confirm, I had Michigan number 1 and Washington number 2. So it's not like I disagree with you. I just think it's as Darrell was saying, it's a great comparison, and it should have been a discussion point.
Okay, and I will concede that. Yeah, I'll change it from not a discussion to let's have a discussion.
That's fair.
Mike thinks I'm tearing you up here, Mike. Mike Rotundo says, Mark, everything Mike says. Well, Mike's shouting at me, Mark, everything Mike says, you knocked down. So why are you asking?
It's a legit. I mean, in retrospect, I did kind of underestimate Washington's, schedule from A to Z. And the Big Ten does have, a lot of low cards in that deck. I will admit that. And I think all the other Big Ten, Michigan, Ohio State, they'll tell you that there's some questionable teams in there. So yeah, I get it that from top to bottom, I originally had the Pac as the best conference in the country early on. I don't know if they are now, but early on, I really had the Pac as the best conference top to bottom. So, that conversation can be made, and I can understand where that's coming from.
Mike, I only asked this question for the sake of debate because, like you, I already have a video. It's documented. It's out there, and really nothing has changed because there have been very few non-conference games played since I made this video. I had the Pac-12 number 1 too, based on results. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but why would you say that the Pac-12 is probably the best conference?
Well, I tend to go by head-to-head, and for a long, wasn't it like week 3 before any Pac team lost to a team that wasn't also in the Pac?
Yeah, the Pac-12 basically beat up on a lot of bad teams.
Yeah,
The
they did
Pac-12, that. And I this didn't hit me until a few weeks ago, and then I actually put a list together and tweeted this out. The Pac-12 had the worst. No, the Big 12 did. I'm sorry. The Big 12 went 1-5 against bowl teams. So I eliminated all the bad teams and just went with the low standard of reaching a bowl, 6-6. The Pac-12 was only 2-4 against bowl teams. They beat Texas Tech and Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think Texas Tech being, down from expectations. I actually had Texas Tech making the Big 12 championship preseason.
The Big Ten actually, one of the reasons I came up with this list was I was getting bashed about the Big Ten being awful. And I thought, okay, there's some Pac-12 people involved in this. And the Big Ten went 5-5 against bowl teams.
That doesn't surprise me.
Not 2-4. And Tice is telling me that I'm a Michigan hate. Well, okay, let's break the big news here. Yeah, I hate Michigan. I'm an Ohio State fan. But I do my damnedest to be reasonable and logical and unbiased when I get into these arguments.
I don't hold that against you. I think it's just exhaustion from all the Ohio State fans with their cast. Because you got
making excuses.
You got you got Barton, you got Zach, you got depressed Ginger. I could go on and on. They all seem to freaking be Ohio State fans. It's obnoxious.
Yeah, do we have a strong contingent on YouTube? Do we?
Yes, unfortunately, you do.
Well, that's.
Can I ask another question about Michigan, Mark?
Absolutely.
So I've got a Michigan fan here, and I've been trying to ask this for weeks. Why is Michigan favored in this game against Alabama? Okay, I see no path why Michigan should be favored in this game. I saw an article from Yahoo Sports about a week ago, and I'm sure the numbers have changed. 80% of the money against the spread or 80% of the money is on Alabama straight up. 93% of the money is on Alabama plus the points.
Yep.
So a large portion of people are taking Alabama.
Okay.
That seems kind of odd because the line has only dropped a half a point since it opened.
Yep.
So if those numbers are true, you'd think Bama would actually, not only would Michigan not be favored, Bama would be favored with those numbers.
Well, yes. Actually, when I was preparing for Michigan podcast, usually Steve Day sends me a little email and just usually sends me like one little tidbit. And that was it. It was actually about that betting situation that you just outlined where the line is not moving, even though all this money is coming in on Bama, which isn't necessarily a good indicator. Okay, first of all, I'll let everyone know I enjoy the analytics of the betting, and I enjoy talking about it, but I'm no expert by any stretch. I have knowledge in it, but I am nowhere close to being any kind of handicapper expert guy. But I think there is no reason, from what I understand, to be overly confident if the public's betting in one direction. The public is fickle and really doesn't know what it's doing. So I'm not saying they're wrong all the time, but I'm just saying it's kind of random. Like they're right half the time, they're wrong half the time. They really don't know what they're doing. So the public money, based on everything I understand from the feedback I've seen, is inconsequential to determining, oh, the public thinks Bama's going to win. Oh, then we know that there's a reason for that. Bama must be winning this game.
This would have to be the first time I could think of where, I mean, if DeReal's numbers are right, where the betting is skewed that much in a direction with the line not moving hardly at all. That's the first time I've ever heard of.
Yes.
Yeah, I saw it from a Yahoo Sports article. It's been about a week ago, so, I'm sure the things have changed. I saw this stat, Mark, as well, and this is just, I'm sure we might have a few Iowa fans listening, so I'm sure I'll be on their radar again, but the over-under first half for Iowa-Michigan, okay, Iowa's point total was set at 0.5.
Wow.
99% of bettors took the over.
Sure.
And went under 0.5.
Yeah.
That's sad.
That's one of the most remarkable numbers I've ever heard. Like I of course didn't bet it, wouldn't bet it, but if somebody said I had to bet it, I would have thought, I guess I'm going to have to take the over. They should be able to do something.
I kind of wonder if that was like a joke or something. Because when I heard, I mean, I wouldn't even put, Iowa versus Iowa. I would take the over at 0.5. Because I honestly thought when I first heard that, it was like a gag. It was like somebody read that on The Onion or something.
I just saw it on a Twitter post. And it, honestly, from what Iowa is, I wouldn't be surprised if that's true. Because you see these free promotional things. It's like bet on this at half a point and something like that. And so it wouldn't shock me at all if it's true. And it's Iowa, so it could have been set at that low. I mean,
it's Iowa, but it's also Michigan too. I mean, we might not have Washington's offense, but we're not exactly crap. I mean, we're still top 20 in points per game. So, I mean, let's not pretend that, this is just, two inanimate objects going up against each other.
So I am seeing this reported as DeReal is outlining this on Sporting News, USA Today, New York Post. Yes. The sports books cleaned up on the first half over-under for the Hawkeyes. The line was 0.5.
I mean, that just seems like free money.
It does.
Can you please tell that to Corey Bradden next time you see him? Hey, Vegas had you at half a point over-under for an entire half against Michigan. And you went under.
You wonder how many teams in the country, and I know that does have something to do with Michigan's defense, of course, but how many teams in the country would Michigan have been playing where Vegas would have put the first half over under at 0.5? Like if they were playing Georgia Southern or Utah State or UTEP, would they have put it at 0.5?
No.
That's bad. That's bad. And Mike Ford, I mean, credit to you, Michigan's defense as well. They get some, they actually did something in that. They factored in somewhat to that equation, but I just saw that, Mark, and I thought, oh my goodness, that's the biggest indictment of an offense I think you could possibly have. But I want to go back to my main point, and why is Michigan favored to win this game over Alabama? What has Michigan done this year? I know they've won every game, literally every game. But I would argue Michigan has looked worse against Ohio State and about the same as Penn State as last year. But yet they're favored against a team that I think is honestly better, at least more talented and got a better coach than they have last year.
Oh, okay. I'll go ahead and take this one. Well, let's just say, we're first of all, the main one, like you said, is 0 losses versus 1 loss. Okay. Now, Michigan is a top 20 offense. They are the number 1 defense. Have we played the best offenses? No argument there. However, Alabama has not really played a whole bunch of great defenses either, and they're right around the same area. I think we're both like right at the high teens for points per game scored. So, and so we're doing it against top defenses. Alabama, not so much. I mean, Georgia's a pretty good defense, but they haven't played Alabama has not played a whole lot of good defenses. Now, for defenses, I mean, it doesn't matter who you play. for a team to be top 10 in points, yards, passing yards, and rushing yards, all four of the majors to be that's hard. You have to be a legit defense to be top 10 in all four of those categories.
These are the best defenses Alabama faced this year statistically. Texas A&M number 9, Georgia 10, Texas 23, Tennessee 40, Mississippi State 42, Kentucky 44, Ole Miss 59.
Yeah.
The worst, South Florida 131, LSU 104, Middle Tennessee 90. I only have this handy because I am going to be producing a video comparing everybody's stats.
And they scored 17 against South Florida. That's a pretty bad indictment.
Yeah, but Mike, if you watch that game, honestly, I think Alabama quit in that game. I think without Jalen,
the rain didn't help either.
I understand that, but I'm not a Big Ten fan, so I don't talk about the weather. But I think without Jalen Milroe there, they just didn't want to play the game. I think the players wanted Jalen Milroe to be their quarterback, and they decided we're not going to try at all. We're so much better than South Florida. We don't even have to put an effort, and we're going to win this game. That's honestly what I think happened. Because I can't think of another logical reason Alabama can be that bad against a team that worse than them. Honestly, I thought it was impossible what happened on that football field for how bad they played. Alabama probably should have lost that game. If they played 110 teams in the country, so I think Alabama would have lost that game.
Yeah, like I say, they weren't going to lose against South Florida no matter what they did. But so that aside, I mean, there were still games, like I said, that the Auburn, the Arkansas, the A&M, where they did not look like a top 4 team by any stretch of the imagination. And if it wasn't for pulling a 4th in a country mile off a miracle catch by Isaiah Bond, we're not having this conversation right now.
Nope.
You're right, but I can also inverse it the other way and say Alabama's had the best performance all season and dominant and controlling their game against Georgia. Controlling their game. They didn't dominate, but they controlled the game. They were decidedly better.
Yeah. And then that also comes down to the argument that I don't think Georgia was the number 1 team. I think that they were number 1 in the fact that they were back-to-back defending national championships and they were undefeated going into that game. But I saw chinks in Georgia's armor all year long. I know you'll disagree with that.
So what team was better than Georgia up until that point? That was clearly better than Georgia. Was it Washington, Michigan, Ohio State?
I would say Michigan, yes. Ohio State, yes. Washington, comparable.
See, to me, Mark, when people accuse me of SEC bias, to me, it's just hilarious. Because Georgia played Ole Miss and absolutely torched the living soul out of them, okay?
The Ole Miss I give you. I give you Ole Miss, but that was pretty much the only game where I said that was impressive. Tennessee is a shell of itself. In fact, the fact that they're ranked beyond me. I thought they barely beat a questionable Missouri team.
Oh, hang on, Mike.
Questionable Missouri.
Now we're starting to delve into an area where if we're going to compare the teams that you're trashing and put them in the Big Ten, okay, Missouri, I'm not selling Missouri as some all-time great team or anything. They're one of the 15 best teams. Shoot, they're ranked 9th. And they're one of the 15 best teams in America. They're easily that. And Georgia, they weren't taken to the wire. It was a good football game. It was a 30-21 game. They played the 4th quarter basically in a comfortable place. It wasn't, again, they didn't dominate, but they weren't threatened down to the wire. And I know this will get some laughs, but beating Kentucky by 30, like they annihilated Kentucky as bad or worse than Ole Miss, probably worse since it was right from the first drive where it took a while against Ole Miss. It was really good first quarter, 14 all.
Thanks, Mark.
It was from
Kentucky's
the get-go.
not good though.
I know they're not good, but are they as good as Maryland? Are they as good as fill in the blank in the Big Ten?
This was actually a question I was wanting to talk to you about, Mark, but I'll just bring it up now. How many teams in the SEC could be the fourth best team in the Big Ten?
Alabama could, Georgia could, maybe Ole Miss.
So I think those three for sure. I would go with LSU, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Florida, Kentucky.
Florida?
Okay, yeah,
I
when you
think
start getting
Florida
to Kentucky
could
and Florida, you lost me.
I think Florida could be because of how talented. You put them in the Big Ten West, they could win that division.
Yeah, that's not saying.
If you put Florida against Iowa, I think they could win that game.
Well,
Nah,
they could.
I guess could
They
is kind of a funny
could,
word.
but
I
Iowa's
don't think it
better
would be
than-
like a mass. What is Tennessee versus Iowa? Tennessee's what, a
Iowa's better
6.5 point favorite?
Yeah, but we'll see them play the game.
Yeah.
And Florida beat Tennessee?
Yeah, I understand you're starting down the path of transitive property. I can play that too.
Well, I understand, but I'm not. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to say there is somewhat of an argument. It's not like I'm saying Mississippi State or
Iowa
anything
only
like
beat
that.
Minnesota. Yeah, that's just the way Iowa plays. But Iowa's a better football team than Florida.
Yeah.
Okay, could Florida beat Maryland, Rutgers,
Sure, they could.
Wisconsin?
They could. It's
So,
not
and
out of the
I
realm of possibility.
okay. Let's remove Florida then. How about
to me, DeReal, the games that the matchups that you just cited to me are just they're toss-ups.
Yeah, I would agree. They were toss-ups.
right? And my point is, I think the SEC is just a much more deeper league than the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten has two great teams, one top 15 team in Penn State, and then Iowa's a top 25 team, and then after that, a lot of trash, just a lot of bad teams, and somebody has to win it. It's like the ACC where Boston College goes 8-4 because, well, you got 8 teams that have to win a game and lose a game.
6. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the Big Ten has
I
turned
don't
into
disagree.
this year.
I don't know. I just think that, I mean, going back to the original one, I mean, you think South Carolina is that good? Because Georgia squeaked by them in Athens.
I don't know if they squeaked by them. They scored 21 straight points in the second half. I don't know if they squeaked
after
by
being
them.
down.
Yeah. They
and to talk about Auburn, Georgia was tied with Auburn halfway through the fourth quarter.
Yep.
So, and we're going back to the whole, Georgia's great, but were they the best team in the country? I can make some arguments that they were not.
Sure. And everything you're saying is valid. I know I'll take my team, Ohio State. If we were going to start this all over and say, let's play like the top 8 teams in the country, I'd rather play Oregon. I'd rather play Washington. I'd rather play even Texas, although I think Texas is very talented, very good, very stout in the line of scrimmage. They're Texas good, they're recruiting, all that. But I'd rather see Oregon and Washington than Alabama and Georgia any day.
In what way? Like competitively, or?
Yeah, I would rather see Ohio State. I would feel ultra confident playing Washington or Oregon, but not ultra confident playing Alabama and Georgia.
I don't know. I can't really put a gauge on Oregon because everybody, for the same reason, Michigan was number one in the eye test. Everybody kept talking about Oregon, the eye test, but maybe they just have, a mental block when it comes to like last year with USC. USC was the best team in the pack, but they just run into Utah twice and just can't jump over that hump. Now there was some controversy in both those losses between the Caleb Williams injury and some really questionable penalties. But sometimes the better team. You could argue that the better team doesn't win either one of 2 games, and I mean I think a lot of people think that Oregon is a better team than Washington, and I couldn't necessarily argue with that. They looked better than Washington through outside those 2 games through the entirety of the schedules.
Mike, you're making good points. And I'm seeing these chats, and I just want to bring them up, Mark, because they don't make sense. I see Mike Rotunda say Penn State would beat every team in the SEC except Alabama and Georgia. As if we just know that for sure. Penn
Yeah,
State's just
that's fine to have that opinion, but yeah, that is far from
Well,
being
isn't the Penn State going to
substantiated.
play the third best team in the SEC in a bowl game here?
no.
Don't tell me LSU is better than Ole Miss.
No, Missouri.
Oh God, no.
Missouri's a great team. See, Pete, this is what I talk about, Mark. Big brand bias. Because their name is Missouri, hardly anybody cares about them. But if you changed out Missouri and you put Texas A&M, people would think as them as a legitimate team.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see what happens because they're going to go against an Ohio State that's going to be pulling guys out of the bleachers to play this game, and we'll see how they do in that one.
Well, Missouri's favored right now to win that game. So,
okay.
Well, that's
unless you think
Ohio
the
State's
Desert
got
has
nobody
SEC
playing.
bias as well.
Yeah, that's not SEC bias. That's just the fact that Ohio State, like I said, they're about ready to pull guys out of bleachers to play because of so many opt-outs and transfers.
Well, we'll see if there are, but you're right, Mike. It's still within question. They're starting to get some favorable mentions that some guys are thinking about playing, possibly going to play, etc.
Yeah, I think right now the Travion Henderson decision is what's kind of looming deep.
But playing with a completely inexperienced quarterback, yeah, for sure. All right, guys.
And if Missouri loses this game by 14 points, that doesn't mean Missouri's trash all of a sudden. I don't want to hear that. They lost to a great team and a talented team in Ohio State. But anyway, Mark, I know you want to wrap us up. You've got more calls. Mike, it's good. Final thing I want to ask Mike before he goes. Mike, how is your shoulder doing? I hope you got good news, man.
Well, I mean, it's still stiff and sore and hurting, but, it's going to be like that for a while. I mean, I'll just have to, grin and bear through it for the next 3.5 weeks while I'm off of work.
Are you out of a sling at this point, or everything going well? Or
they gave me the sling to keep. They want me to put my arm in it, but I haven't put my arm back in the sling since I left my post-op. So I figured as long as I don't get any swelling in my arm, I'm going to keep it off. That way I can type. Because I mean, I can type now. I hated before because it used to take me 10 minutes to respond to somebody because I'm doing the pointer finger type, and it just annoyed me. That's why I wasn't on nearly as much. A lot of times I would pop on to Mark's, on StreamYard and not be active in the chat because, I could talk like this. Whereas, for me to say everything I just said right now, it would take me 20 minutes of, boop, boop, boop with my finger. But I appreciate the
right,
ask.
Mike. Yeah.
No problem. I hope you're doing well, Mike. Anyway, Mark, that's all I got to you. Fight on and go Dogs.
And go Blue, and thanks for having me.
Thanks, Mike. So before we get to Jackson here, Connor. So Connor, if you're talking about the people in the chat, absolutely. They're fans. They're biased. Yes. If you're listening to what I'm talking about, I have no idea what that statement even means. You didn't listen to what was just said in the last half hour. If you're talking about me, I just pretty much cut the Big Ten down to size in a number of ways. So I don't know if you're talking about the channel, talking about the folks in there. So I understand if that's the case. All right, let's get to Jackson.
How you doing, Mark?
I'm good. What's going on?
Oh, nothing much. Just want to go over a couple bowl games with you.
Yeah.
The LA Bowl with UCLA Boise State.
Yep.
Now, I know the coaching carousel is over for now.
Yeah.
But I kind of have that feeling there's going to be that one firing that's going to happen. I know UCLA fans have been dissatisfied with Martin Jarmon. I believe that's the AD's name.
Yes.
They've been telling him, read the room. And UCLA, they lost their DC to USC. That's ouch right there.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they had a lot of opt-outs, which that's going to happen. But they lose to Boise State. Does this hot seat discussion continue? Because I've been thinking about this because we haven't heard anything about a vote of confidence for 2024. Nothing. But what do you think, Mark?
Well, I also think that the Dante Moore situation is curious. I would like to know a little bit more. Like, I'm not ultra concerned. Like, I'm not going to fly off the handle because somebody transferred. That's happening all over the place every day. But we're talking about a quarterback who's only in his second season, got playing time. It was pretty much the job was, here you go. And of course, he squandered away with bad turnovers. And so he should be in a perfect position to take over the role as the starting quarterback the next year. And they lose him.
That's bad.
Yeah. And to your point, the defensive coordinator situation, man, they let a guy go who was doing a bang up job, turned around their defense, did a remarkable job this year, and let him go across town. Yeah.
And to your biggest rival, that's gotta hurt. That's gotta hurt worse than a bee sting.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's gonna hurt big time. Well, and I was thinking about the Fenway Bowl, SMU Boston College. Now I know SMU is very unhappy about being left out of the New Year's Six. They won their first conference title since 1984, I believe, in the Southwest Conference days. But I believe it's their first, some might say their first legitimate conference title since 1966 with Hayden Fry back in those days. But I'm just kind of thinking, what's going to be going on with the motivation with SMU against their future conference opponent, Boston College, in the Fenway Bowl? I can't believe that's going to be a conference game next year.
Yeah, that's hilarious. I would think that SMU would be motivated to some degree, taking on a Power Five. And again, like you say, having some knowledge that they're going to be conference foes next season and wanting to put a capper on a fine 11-2 year in which they could make the case for being the best group of five. I believe that Preston Stone's going to be fine to come back and play in the bowl game.
Yeah. I mean, Boston College, they've kind of had the up and down year. I mean, they flopped against Northern Illinois, barely beat Holy Cross. Then that little spanking that they got from the belt from Louisville was a reality check. But then the last three games, they fall apart. So Jeff Hafley's basically done just enough to keep his job for 2023.
Yeah, it was funny how quickly they became bowl eligible. I think they got to 6-3, but yeah, they're not good running game with Robichaud at running game at running back, and of course can't think of the quarterback's name, the mobile quarterback, good runner. He's exciting. He can make some plays. Silianos, can't think of his. Anyway, but yeah, I just don't think Boston College is a very good football team.
No, I mean, it's just not a good day. It's not going to be a good day for Boston College.
That's his name, I believe. I'm going to look it up.
And I was thinking about how we're looking back on some of the former Big East Conference games like South Florida, Syracuse, and Miami, Rutgers. Rutgers never gotten a win against Miami at all. So if they beat them in the Pinstripe Bowl, it'll be their first ever win against Miami.
Yes, Thomas Castellanos. Nice little running season for Boston College. But yeah, Rutgers taking on Miami. Could be a little frigid for the Canes at Yankee Stadium a few days after Christmas.
That'll be fun. I mean,
and the quarterback situation at Miami, I guess it's going to be Jakari Brown who's going to play. Emory Williams obviously hurt against Florida State, and Tyler Van Dyke transfers. So I think they've got to go with Jakari Brown at quarterback. He started 2 games, I believe, last year, one against Georgia Tech, which was a pretty good outing, but also played an awful game against Clemson last year, but he hasn't started at all this year. So interesting quarterback situation there for the Canes.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. And we know how Miami's been a Jekyll and Hyde team all season where, for example, one week they were great against Texas A&M, but then they blew it against Georgia Tech, almost blew it against Virginia. They are weird. But the Gasparilla Bowl, that's the Jekyll and Hyde Bowl with Georgia Tech and Central Florida. I keep thinking about that game. And I saw Central Florida as the 4-point favorite. I'm like, I'm going to go with Georgia Tech on this one.
Yeah, Georgia Tech certainly played some games against some decent teams and showed up at times. Had a decent effort early in the season against Louisville. Played, of course, the infamous kneel down game against Miami and pulled that out. Haynes King at quarterback. But yeah, UCF, they had that outlandish game against Oklahoma State with a few weeks left where they just pummeled the Cowboys 45-3, but went through a real rough time in the Big 12 before that, but finished fairly strong. Yeah, should be an interesting one.
Yeah, Central Florida has been weird. They've been a weird one. Like they're fantastic against Oklahoma State and Ollie Gordon, and they basically smack him around. But then several weeks earlier, they blow a 28-point lead against Baylor. I mean,
yeah,
and
well,
that's just bad.
This is what these 6-6. You take 6-6, 7-5, 5-7 teams in college football. That's pretty much what they are, most of them.
Yeah, Minnesota, I know, is the only 5-7 team for, well, obvious reasons with the APR. I'm kind of wondering if Minnesota has another season like that next year. Are we seeing any hot seat talk for PJ Fleck going into after next season?
I would think so.
Yeah.
I would think so. And I would think that they are hot in the transfer portal trying to get a quarterback.
They better get one soon. I can tell you, it's going to be ugly over in Minnesota. They don't have that winning streak over Wisconsin anymore. So that's bad for them. But it's going to be exciting seeing James Madison Air Force. Love that little Air Force helmet, by the way.
There we go. There it is.
Yep. That's going to be a great game to see on December 23rd. I mean, December 23rd and December 16th, it's basically a football paradise right there. Flipping between NFL and college football bowl games right there. I'm just going to be like, I know for December 23rd, I'm just going to be watching the bowls on the TV, and with the Peacock app, I'll just be like, oh, well, let's watch a little NBC game on the iPad. Okay, what's up with Pittsburgh? What's up with Pittsburgh Steelers? Oh, here we go. What's up with Utah Northwestern? Let's go. That's going to be a fun day right there. So somebody's asked me, what do you want for Christmas? I already got for Christmas. Watching a little bit of games here and there.
You're good?
I don't need much. I mean, Chick-fil-A honey mustard. That's always a win right there.
All right, Jackson.
Well, thank you for having me on, Mark. And
thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me on, man. Stay safe, stay warm. It's cold out. Good night.
All right. Man, we're pushing the 3-hour mark here. Let's we'll move through the last two. James Humperhard. Yes, well done. There, James. James has been waiting probably for me to say that name for how long? I don't know. But good job, James. Where's the Michigan helmet? Come on, Mark. Show it. Yeah, we show that thing off way too much. James, if you add, I don't know, you got to add at least 2 zeros to that. You know what we may do? In your honor, James, we're going to hide the Michigan helmet for, I don't know, the next, 3 months? We can do 3 months. Yeah, let's do 3 months. All right. I got a note to self. No Michigan helmet for 3 months. All right, let's get to these super chats. I've not ignored them. I just forgot about them. Sorry. Moose, appreciate you being here. Mark, just got word Bama has hired former Michigan linebacker coach George Hilo to the staff. Cheaters. Death penalty, wins vacated. Is Bama scared of Michigan? Is Bama scared of Michigan? That's a typo, Moose. That's a typo. So correct your typo. I got it, though. I can correct your typos on the fly. Is Michigan scared of Bama? They might be. That would not surprise me in any such way. Jim Harbaugh's postseason track record, Nick Saban's track record postseason. Yeah, maybe. Corey, appreciate you being here. Found your channel through Michigan Podcast. Well, they're doing some good work there at Michigan Podcast. That's their mission in life. Funnel people to me. Appreciate your fair, balanced, and comprehensive content. We'll continue to follow. Well, thank you there, Corey. We appreciate that. Michigan's key is a fast start versus Bama. Can't afford to play from behind. I would agree. Yes. And then we've got Moose coming back. Thank you so much for that, Moose. That's very nice of you, especially since I've taken a few veiled shots against Michigan tonight, but they've been veiled when the analysis has been straightforward and we've been focused and taking our football analysis serious. I've been very, very kind to Michigan tonight and very straightforward. I got Michigan number one. They're number one in the top 25. That actually makes sense. Get your jacket at the Voice of College Football. All right. Will checking in tonight.
Hey, Mark.
How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited about... I'm always excited about the Notre Dame season, but I'm getting excited about the 2024 season with a bunch of the players coming back.
Yes.
Like, we have both the interior linemen, Riley Mills and Howard Cross are both coming back. So that makes me very much more optimistic about the 24 season. And as well as Jack Kaiser, linebacker, coming back.
Jack Kaiser?
As well.
Okay.
So I'm hopeful. I'm always hopeful. I'm always kind of like it's our year at the beginning of the season, but
that's good. Good place to be. It's good to be an optimist in life.
Yeah,
should be.
I got that from my dad.
That's good.
But yeah, and we got the wide receiver transfers coming in, so now we'll have competent play at receiver. So I'm hopeful with Riley Leonard coming in. The O-line is my biggest concern. Because with Harry Hiestand leaving, the O-line group took a dip after his first exit, and then it kind of took a dip after his second exit again.
So I saw Riley Leonard play the Notre Dame game. I saw him play against Florida State before he got hurt. Saw the Clemson game. Is Riley Leonard... Well, he's a much different quarterback than Sam Hartman, for one thing. He's a great gamer, and he's a tough guy. He's tough to bring down. He's a good runner. He's a gamer. He's a baller, all those things. Is he really that good?
He's better than... I haven't seen that much tape of Riley, but he's looked like the real deal in the games that I've watched, and I'm hopeful that...
But you're hopeful and excited about who's the stud backing him up?
Kenny Minchie?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm excited about Kenny, too. I think it'll be a battle. I don't think it'll be hands down Riley's job. But I think having two potentially good quarterbacks is better than having just one potentially good quarterback with Sam. Because Kenny was only a freshman and Steve was... only a 3-star.
So I don't believe Ohio State fans are going to enjoy this comment, but I made it the other day, and I'm not saying that I'm at practice and I can make the call, but I'm just saying there could be a situation in which, and so I'm only bringing this up because of the Notre Dame situation with quality recruits in the room, that chasing, let's say Cam Ward's off the table, that he's off the board. He goes to Miami or wherever he goes, Florida State. And who else is left? A lot of decent quarterbacks, but really, if Lincoln Keen Holtz and Devin Brown and now Air Noland, although he's going to be a true freshman, if you've recruited as well as the rankings say you have and you can develop quarterbacks, I know people don't like going in this day and age of transfer quarterbacks where you can say, oh, well, this guy threw 25 touchdowns at Arkansas or Mississippi State last year. Let's go get him, or Washington State. But I don't know necessarily if those guys are going to be better than one of those three quarterbacks, the best of those three, developed and coached for another off season on top of the off season they've already had in the entire year.
I agree, Mark. I mean, there's a whole Twitter argument between Notre Dame fans about like if they even wanted Riley, but I mean, I'm just happy that there's another good quarterback in the room that like I want it to be. I feel like if they're both in the room, they'll both get better. And I don't know, a lot of Irish fans like lost faith in Gino Guidugli, the quarterbacks coach from they got from Cincinnati. But I'll give him a mulligan with Sam because he was kind of programmed in one way with the slow mesh to stare receivers down, and like I guess. And I don't know, this is the best way to describe it. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, so it was tough to try to get Sam to become an NFL style quarterback.
Are you looking forward to this bowl game?
I mean, it'll be fun to see the young guys out there, especially a linebacker. I mean, they're got an extremely talented recruiting class in 2023 of linebackers. So I think they'll definitely get a lot of playing time alongside Jalen Sneed from the 2022 class, who was extremely raw when he came in, but he was a 5-star. So I definitely think he has the talent there to be a great player in 24. But I don't know. It'll be fun. It'll be fun to interact with the Beaver fans. They're fun. Connor and friends.
Yes, Connor. We appreciate Connor being here. He should probably give me a call more often because certainly is rarely appreciative of the love that I give to the Pac-12 and some of it undeserved. But I understand he's probably a little put off these days because of the plight of his school.
Yeah. But did you follow the awards much?
No. I have no idea who won any awards.
Okay, so this will be fun. So Xavier Watts for Notre Dame won the Bronco Nagurski Award.
Yes, okay, I did see that. Ironically, I did.
And I gotta be honest, like he had a great year, but I thought Peyton Wilson from NC State was gonna win. But it's just crazy the journey that he went on in Notre Dame. Like he came in as a pretty little known. Especially because the wide receiver recruiting and coaching was bad under Del Alexander. Like he's bad at his job. Not going to sugarcoat it. I mean, the Chancey Stuckey wasn't that much better at coaching, but at least he brought guys in, although most of them left. But he came in at Notre Dame as a little known 3-star receiver from Nebraska, and he couldn't get much playing time, so they moved him over to safety after a while. And then they're going to move him back to wide receiver, and then they eventually moved him back to safety. And he was coached up well under Chris O'Leary, but he won the award. And he had a breakout year this year and won the award. But like that just shows, like in any, like if he would have came in like that, I mean, I feel like most players would have left and transferred out immediately. So it just shows that like you don't have to go to the transfer portal. You can persevere and go and stay with the team. Especially with the culture that Notre Dame has, and come out well. So I'm hopeful that like other players will learn his story and maybe think twice before entering the portal, because it could turn out well if you stay with your school.
Yeah, it could. And I think that a lot of people have the the take on this is that it's eventually going to slow down. It's almost like the opt-outs. If you look at the opt-outs, they reached a peak. They kept increasing a little bit every year, and now they've kind of leveled off. And I don't know that they've lessened, but they've kind of pulled back and just kind of hit a floor or possibly a ceiling. And I think we'll see the same thing with the transfer portal.
Yeah, I mean, if he comes back, I think the Irish have a championship level defense. It's just the offense has to do enough to. I mean, I don't know. I feel like Notre Dame should get in the playoff with the schedule that they have. It's not as tough as this year's schedule. Just looking at it, I'm feeling pretty good about a playoff spot. But then again, the Irish could disappoint me again. But I think it's definitely if the Irish win the Texas A&M game, I would be shocked if we don't end up making the playoff. But if we lose the A&M game, we could end up 8-4 again. Who knows? I mean, it's the way college football goes. You never know what's going to happen.
Well, you don't, although there's some level of predictability there for sure.
Yeah. But Connor went to score prediction. I'll go 31-21 Irish as my score prediction for the Sun Bowl.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, it's just unfortunate that the Beavers are without DJ, Aiden Childs, and Damian Martinez.
Yeah. I will look at a prediction at some point. All right, Will. Anything else?
Just wanted to check in, call in. I've been busy. I haven't been able to call in for a while.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
I'm a little sketched out by the last caller when we were chatting in the private chat. I don't know. I hope they aren't like a weirdo, like that, showing bad stuff, but we'll see.
Yeah, we don't know, and we won't know. So they're gone.
Oh, they're gone now?
Yes,
okay.
They're gone.
Oh, okay. Well, have a great rest of your night then, Mark. If you're
Thanks, Will. Appreciate it.
Calls.
All right. Neil, thank you so much for the contribution, sir. Appreciate you. Appreciate everyone. I see you got the pack up front. Always enjoy the show, Mark. Well, my thought process there, Neil, because for as random as this is, it's usually just whatever got moved there. If I'm shooting videos with those particular teams, then if I think about it, boom, I will place the teams that I'm talking about in back of me. But the rest of the time during the call-in shows, it's just whatever's there. However, I thought, you know what? All right, we've got a bunch of group of 5 teams playing in bowl games on Saturday. But then I started moving them, and I thought, really, aside from Air Force, I don't have any of the teams because we only have, out of the group of 5, Nevada has not been to a bowl game since now 2021. So it's been 2 years. So in honor of you, Neil, we'll keep Nevada there for a while during bowl season. Went to the Quick Lane Bowl against Western Michigan a few years ago with Carson Strong, your quarterback. UCLA is playing on Saturday. Again, Air Force is playing on Saturday. Nevada, no bowl game. Navy, no bowl game. But we still moved the group of 5s to the front since it is a group of 5 day, basically. And Kent State, I don't know where they went. But thank you so much, Neil. Appreciate you. Appreciate your contribution. Appreciate everyone here at the Voice of College Football. We just had a nice little small, intimate gathering tonight. Hopefully we will do much better in the future. 3 hours in the books. We'll be back sometime on Friday. We'll see. I will look to do what I vowed to do all the time, and that's once we get to the off season, pretty much lock in and say, hey, here's the schedule. If I could rid myself of these team channels and the obligations there, then I would be able to lock in on a call-in show schedule. That's what I would like to do here on a regular basis, what I'm looking for. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. So please, if you enjoy the content, if you don't enjoy the content, you can kill this channel pretty easily. Just ignore it, obviously, and then tell people bad things about me and try to pull people away to do something else. So if you don't like the channel, don't like the content, want me to go away, that can happen. So, but understand I'll be fine. So that's not going to ruin my life by any stretch. But if you like the content, want it to continue to happen, then please do things like use the Amazon link in the description section of the video. It's Christmas time. I would expect our Amazon usage to spike. It should spike over these last couple of weeks. It should. So please use the Amazon link in the description section of the videos. Doesn't cost you anything. It's completely transparent to you. So please use the Amazon link in the description section of the videos. And if you've got a business or you want to promote your own personal brand, hit me up at MarkRogersTV, and we can certainly partner together and promote your brand, your business, whatever you've got going, your personal brand, your podcast, whatever you've got going. We can do that to the nth degree in a number of ways, not just talking on here, other ways to do that as well. So we can partner with you here at the Voice of College Football. All right. You can follow me on Twitter, MarkRogersTV. Follow me on Twitter. We have a good time over there as well. All right, folks. Appreciate you being here. Neil and others, thank you so much for the contributions coming in tonight from Corey, Moose, James with the interesting last name. I'm glad you've been able to make it through life without too much ridicule. But yes, Moose, Corey, James, and Neil, thank you so much for the contributions here at the Voice of College Football. We will see you soon. Content is coming, believe me. So keep it locked in.